got in over the weekend.
I would like to call to order the May 1st, 2017 Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners meeting. Welcome, everyone. First item on our agenda is the approval of the work session agenda, and you all have that before you. Do I hear a motion in that regard? And I'm assuming so moved for approval. Absolutely. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes, and we move on to discussion items for action at our May 15th meeting. First up is Human Resources, and Lundy Covington and guests are here to talk with us about that.
Ann Lewis, who is their senior vice president, one of their senior vice presidents. She's here to present with us. And Ashley Allen will be joining us hopefully in just a few moments. She was also very involved with the study process when Ann's associate was here with us. So what we wanted to do is share with you a PowerPoint presentation that will be kind of a supplement to some materials you received with your agenda packet. You also have a copy in that packet of some items she's going to refer to. So rather than flipping off of the PowerPoint, that will give you the charts and the attachments. So when Ann mentions that, you can refer to the stapled packet within your booklet. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ann, and she's going to walk us through Springstead's findings.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being here today. As Lundy said, I'm here on behalf of Mr. Johnny Enzavino, who has worked with you last year, as well as most of this particular, well, really all of this study, but was unable to be here today due to a health reason. And so I'm pinch hitting for him. I'm not Mr. Enzavino, but have been very involved with understanding the objectives and the where you've gotten to at this point. So as I go through these slides, if you have questions, feel free to stop me. However, it may be that I'm going to touch on a few of these things as I go through, and you might want to just hold your questions to the end. But either way, I'm very flexible. We can do either way. As I mentioned, this is the second year of the three-part study. And this year included a broad range of departments, mainly including some administrative in nature, economic development, infrastructure and asset management, human services, and some miscellaneous positions. The objectives here on slide 2 and slide 3 will really play into the conclusions that I'm going to draw at the end of this presentation, and as well as the recommendations. So as we did this analysis, we kept at the forefront that we needed to look at the competitiveness of the salaries for these key positions that were identified for the second year of the study, particularly in comparison to the external market value. But certainly as we do our analysis, we look at the internal compression that could exist within your current structure. We looked at class descriptions with interviews of our employees. John spent, I think, nearly 6 days on site in talking with the affected folks in this particular study and their corresponding department directors. And so we updated those class descriptions. Evaluation, again, of that internal ranking of current positions to make sure that we had a good analysis of any compression that may have occurred. And then on slide 3, the integration of this data that we pulled from external market sources, which I'll talk about here in a few minutes. And we integrated that into a current salary schedule. And again, with the analysis of this data to the new salary schedule, and then making sure that the employees were put into, the employee positions rather, were put into the appropriate grade in the salary schedule. So again, the goal of these objectives are going to, hopefully result in a higher retention rate due to, an increase in employee satisfaction. And among some other conclusions that I'm going to draw at the end of this particular presentation. So moving on to slide 4, talking a little bit about the methodology. And again, I'm going to kind of go over this rather briefly because this is the second year we used the same process that we did last year in coming on site and talking with the employees, conducting, having employees complete a position analysis questionnaire, which is essentially a survey for the employees to tell us specifically about their job and what they do, not just at the time that we're conducting the survey, but we ask them to look at their position in a year-round mode, because there's certainly some seasonal work that we do in our jobs, whether it's in finance or in truly a seasonal type position. But we ask employees to look and think about their jobs year-round. And this is difficult for some employees because it's not, we ask for them to think about their positions in a way that they don't normally think about their positions, because they just know what they need to do and they get it done. And when you're asking them to look at their position and think about it, it takes some time. You know, usually we get hired and we don't look at our job description again until who knows when, until we come in and do a study like this and ask them to. Things happen, we get efficient in more ways, technology comes in, technology leaves, and so sometimes our job descriptions aren't fully up to date, and the best way to do that is to have discussions with employees. We did data collection with our external stakeholders. I'll outline those in a few minutes. Evaluated the positions, again, obtained this market data. We develop a salary line using regression analysis, and this is really a quality check for us. Our regression line was a 97% regression line, so that is an indication to us that the data that we obtained from the external markets, benchmarks rather, and was very good. And we had a high percentage of participation of benchmark localities, which again helped us develop a very sound salary line. We then use that data to assign our positions to pay grades, and then develop implementation options along with the pay schedule. On this slide, you'll see the 21 localities that were identified as benchmark localities. The asterisks are next to 17 localities which participated. And as we were meeting earlier, I said this is a significant number of high participation rate, and I attribute that to your Human Resources Department and the relationships that they develop with those localities, because this is a lot of work for localities to participate in a survey. We're asking them for a lot of information, and it takes time. And if they choose to participate, there's some reciprocal data sharing up to a point, but again, 17 out of 21 is a very significant. As well as we asked them to give us information on 61 different positions, and we received data on 57. So again, that's a very significant return rate on that. When we looked at our positions, we used the SAFE system, and the SAFE system is our company's developed system. It's been tested in federal court. We look at these 9 different factors that are related to everyone's work. We assign points to each one of these factors, and then we total those points, and after we total those points, that total score helps us rank positions and helps us group them and then put them into the salary schedule. So some positions may receive more points on the level of work, and other positions are going to receive more points on working conditions. And we have found that these 9 particular factors essentially cover all areas of the work that we do here in local government. So on slide 7, just a little bit about the ongoing administration. And I really do commend you for embarking on this particular study, because it is not, our employees are our highest, generally our highest budget item, and without our employees, we're not able to deliver the services at local government level. And so once you take a look at this is going to require, it needs to be a living and breathing document that doesn't just sit on a shelf and gather dust, but you're going to need to look at what type of annual adjustments that you need to make to your system to make sure that you're continue to be a competitive employer and maintain a competitive position in the market. Because as we've seen the economy grow again, we're seeing that folks are a little bit more encouraged to perhaps leave an organization. And what can we do as the employer to make sure that we keep our competitive advantage over other employers and maintain being an employer of choice. So again, looking at guidelines for adjustments, I'll talk a little bit about our analysis that we've done here, adjust pay ranges and wages of employees when it's applicable, and certainly recognize individual employee performance on an annual basis. You know, we hope that the investment that you make here will mean that you will have a lower cost of turnover. Because when you have turnover at your organization, there is certainly a cost to that. Not just a cost to the position that's vacated, but a cost to the employees who are then having to take on the additional work and or additional pay because you're paying overtime. And then it's just this kind of snowball effect. So I always kind of think of it as you can pay it in one spot or the other, and paying it on the maintaining an employee and investing in that current employee is generally a lot less expensive than the cost of turnover. And so essentially we have several findings here that we want to review with you. Some salaries are lower than the average salary rate paid in comparable of those 17 organizations based upon the analysis that we did. There are several internal, that compression inequity within, and we've so then have recommended some reclassification, and that affects about 224 positions. The pay ranges, which are currently in a STEP system, we are going to make a recommendation that that goes to an open range. STEP system, in the analysis that we did of the 17, only 2 continue to do with a STEP system. The other 15 are open range, and it allows the county a little bit more a lot more flexibility as far as where a position will fit within that range. And so if you do adopt the range system, that there's some policies that we would recommend be updated as well. And the final 2 recommendations, we would recommend, so as a result of these findings, we have 4 recommendations for you. Again, that first one, adopting the open range. And here, if you'd like to refer to your attachment 1 in your separate stapled document, there is the advantages and disadvantages of the open range system. And again, that flexibility that it allows the county is cannot be understated as to where you can really help that be a living, breathing pay plan for you. The second recommendation is that the market-based salary schedule be adopted. And again, in attachment 2 of your stapled document, you will see a side-by-side comparison of the proposed salary range next to your current salary range. And so you're going from a 53 to 89 to a pay grade 1 through 50. And we really tried to mirror those so that you had some consistency when you're making a change in your salary schedule. The third recommendation is, again, those policy changes that I referred to earlier, should you go with that open range system. And those, that analysis is in your attachment 3. And essentially there are really two changes to that. One is how quickly employees are able to move through the ranges. And again, that's that open range rather than the step system. So you need to identify what your philosophy and approach to that will be. And the second is how to place an employee in that range should you hire them with experience, which is an appropriate way to compensate an employee when they do bring experience to your organization. So our conclusions are that this will result in a fair and equitable compensation. And again, you know, that's where employees find great value and pride in the work that they do, and showing that they are compensated fairly and equitably in their organization. And as I alluded to earlier, you know, our hope is that, and what we find is that this, when you do so, this does reduce your turnover, and that those, when you're trying to recruit, they recognize that Cabarrus County is a county that places a high importance and value on this type of changes to their compensation system. And so you will start to see people looking to wanting to join your organization. Again, we looked at the compression internally and externally and have made recommendations on those. And again, that just happens over time. And so keeping a pulse on where that compression is and making tweaks on an annual basis is really going to help alleviate some of that compression when that does happen. And then, as I mentioned earlier, again, job changes. You know, technology helps us, and sometimes when we don't look at job descriptions, we realize, well, we don't need to do this function anymore, or we have new technology and it requires a higher level of trained employee bringing on board. And so again, wanting to recognize those folks who come in with skills that can really hit the ground running. And then, of course, best practices. That anything that has changed with the salary schedule and hiring policies, that you're staying competitive and you're staying consistent with how you administer your program. So that's the quick version of was really a time very much dedicated by your employees as well as your Human Resources Department. I can't understate the amount of time that it takes and a lot of back and forth between Mr. Anzavino and Lundy to make sure that we understand specifically what's happening and to really hear the challenges that you're having here in Cabarrus County. So it's on behalf of Mr. Anzavino, it really has been our pleasure to serve you in this capacity, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have questions? It's a lot of information to absorb.
It is.
If I could just maybe point out that attachment 4 is the last exhibit, and that's the one that basically talks about the findings of the study relative to the positions that Ann described, human services, IM, our admin, job family. That information has been priced out at a rough amount and placed in the detail for this year's budget. So you're probably more used to seeing that type of chart or information, so that's in here. This year, with the recommendation to change our salary tables, we haven't finalized that number and gotten it down to the exact amount. The plan would be that if you approve the results of the study and us moving forward, we would look at implementing the salary tables in a timeline that would hopefully have them in place by September, and any recommendation from this table 4 would go into place for those employees in September. So there's a little bit of a time delay over what we normally present, and Pam has incorporated that as a 10-month adjustment versus a 12-month adjustment for impacted employees this year. I just want to make sure that was clear.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Lundy, have we decided, or do we know at this point what the bottom line cost is going to be?
I think the amount you put in there as a placeholder, Pam, was
The 10-month estimate's about $450,000. That's salary and benefit adjustments.
Okay, that's taking some that may be making, that will not make as much, and then the other ones that will make more. But that's what the net cost would be, about $450,000.
Yes, salary and benefits.
Okay, thank you.
and I want to make sure we add this as well. Part of this group, the Human Services family, which is 300 plus employees, that group has not been looked at for a study since 2009, which was the last time we did a full county study. So there was a significant bit of movement, as you can see in that final chart or exhibit, but those positions have been stagnant for a very long period of time. IM and the admin positions were reviewed, I believe, 3 years ago, so they're kind of timing back around, but it's been a very long time with Human Services positions.
On the Human Services positions, does that, I know that we receive reimbursements for a lot of those positions.
Mm-hmm.
How does that tie in with this?
You wanna?
That was not accounted for, the increase in the salary, so there'll probably be more revenue collected for those particular positions, but to go through and figure out who that person was and where they were and where they fell into the grant reimbursement process was just a little time-consuming for this
Right.
portion of it. But yeah, there will be a revenue adjustment that goes along with those positions.
So on those reimbursed positions, we report what we actually spend and they
Correct.
reimburse us okay. I wasn't sure if they had a set amount. Okay. Well, that helps.
Actual cost, yes.
Yes. So have you kind of taken that into account on the total amount? I think you said no.
No, I did not take
So
that
it-
into account.
That's really
A higher estimate,
higher
hopefully,
estimate.
than what we would
that
actually.
hopefully it would come in maybe a bit lower than that.
Correct.
And we also don't account for employees that maybe are changing or leaving. So that's data that we provided to Springstead back in December, November?
November, I want to say.
So we'll run the exact numbers,
Right.
later and can update that. But Pam was good enough just to kind of put in that general estimate for the budget purpose.
Right. Yes, sir.
One quick question about the study. On page 6, slide 6, everything on there is public sector except for one, and Carolina's Healthcare did not respond, but I guess I'm curious, what's the thought process of having private sector contribute to the study? Is it more, we do things that, actually, what's the, I'm having a hard time getting that out. Why are we asking a private sector firm for their input unless, do they do a lot of what we do, or is it because some other reason? I mean, I guess I'm just curious, give me an overview of that. I'm sorry, that was a
Yes.
very poorly worded question.
It's really, it's a very good question. It's generally a combination of two reasons. One is, in this particular example, Carolina's Healthcare may be a competitor for you, an employee competitor for certain positions, like administrative positions, secretarial type of positions, and/or
The infrastructure and asset
Yeah.
management is basically
Okay.
where we felt their input will be important for our custodian positions, for our, some of those general services type roles. So they were not asked to provide other than what they matched up with. But the hope was, because they're the largest employer in our area, we could glean a little data from them. So that
Yeah,
was why they
and
were
in fact, that was
included.
running through my mind as I was asking the question. It was shared jobs and size of employer.
Yeah.
So really, it's kind of both.
yeah, and it is always a challenge to get from private sector,
Right.
data from private sector, absolutely.
Okay. And you said the last full, I think I asked this same question last time. The last time we did a full one was 2009. I think you just repeated it. And subsequently, every couple years, we do a certain segment.
We started, this is the
Yeah,
third
okay.
year of that, and rather than, when the recession hit, we stopped doing for a pretty long period of time. When we resumed doing studies, rather than doing every position at one time and doing it every 2 years, we went to a 3-year review cycle. So the plan is that each group of positions will be reviewed once every 3 years. So we will be bringing some data to you each year for you to consider, but it would be a smaller budget impact, and it would also be a little easier for us and for our departments to go through the process. It did take a fair bit of time for the interviews and the analysis, so it kind of breaks it up for several reasons. So this will be the final group to be studied since '09. Human Services is the one that has not been looked at.
And so then next year, we'll start back with the first
Public
group
safety would
again.
be
Right.
in line again.
How many employees are affected?
The number
these
that
positions?
were impacted was 224. The number included in the survey was closer to 400 or a little higher. I don't know if either of you recall the exact number.
Positions or?
People. It's, by title, you can see the number. We'd have to count them real quickly, the number.
Well, that's okay, I see the
Yeah.
224 on the back of this.
That speaks to the employees, but again,
Okay.
it was closer to 400 or a little above total that were included. Just, they didn't come back with recommendations that some of those be adjusted.
Okay, so these are the ones you're talking adjusting, okay.
Correct.
And so that's employees, not position, I mean, like, total employees that would be divided among or whatever, however it broke out.
Correct, based on the count back in November.
Okay.
So some of these may have
Changed a
lost a
little.
position or two,
Yeah.
but that's, again, our best
Okay.
count based on when the survey was started.
One more. On slide 8, salaries paid to some Cabarrus County employees, some's left to interpretation. Can you give me a percentage? Rounded? And I won't hold you to the exact number, but some's a pretty big word.
I agree. And unfortunately, I don't know that percentage. I don't know.
We
if
can
you
ask
have
John if
any-
he can calculate that. I'm
Yeah.
thinking it's basically the the number that we are increasing versus the number that we didn't. So
Okay.
we can get you some exact numbers on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Well, certainly appreciate all of your efforts on this. I think your information at the end was very important, and a lot of employers fail to recognize that if you just let that go along and everything's running smoothly, and then all of a sudden you lose a key person, and you find out it was because of a pay differential that wasn't all that significant, then you say, well, gosh, we could have fixed that. But then it's too late. So I appreciate the effort to look over these ahead of time and try to prevent some of those things. Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda are discussion items with no action. And first up is 3.1, financial impact of House Bill 13 on school districts. And I think Pam is who's on my list to talk about that, but she's looking like maybe
Where are you
that's
at?
not correct.
Which one did you just call out?
Financial impact of House Bill 13.
Yeah, I'll talk about it. Yeah. That was the one where we were concerned, and we as staff, you as a board, have been tracking it for quite a while, and that was the impact of reducing class sizes, a requirement to reduce class sizes, and thus the financial impact and operational impact to the school system, and then what the resulting cost to the school system and to the county was going to be. After a lot of debate within the legislature and a lot of advocacy from you and other boards of commissioners and from school boards, the decision at the legislative level has been decided to push that out for a year. And at that time, they would consider to revisit it, and when they do, any changes they would make would be to provide additional funding to help cover that. If they don't, then we'll be right back here again next year talking about the same issues. So, got something else to add to that?
Help a little bit? Yeah.
Yeah.
The budget's not done yet, so there still needs to be advocacy as far as on the Senate side, who will start the budget, to get them to go ahead and fund special teachers, is how their specialty teachers would be how they're classified. The Senate needs to add into their budget for the next 2 years the amount of money to cover those positions. Art, music, PE at the elementary level. If they don't add it in this year in the budget, all they've done is kick the can down the road for another year, and we're going to be in the same problem, but worse, because they don't start session next year till May. So when they start, and when they first go into session in May, that's too late to make a decision, and that's too late for the teachers who were hired and in those positions to figure out if they have a job or not, and it's too late for the school system. Well, I won't say too late. It will be problematic for every school system in the state of North Carolina to replace that or hire that many additional teachers in order to meet the mandate. So what needs to happen now is the legislature needs to add, and I'm sorry, I do not remember the amount of money. Do you remember how much it is estimated statewide? I can get it.
Yeah.
I want to say, well, I don't want to say. I can get it. I'm sure I have it on my phone, but they need to go ahead and amend the budget this year instead of kicking the can down the road. The teachers need to be there for class size, and those specialty positions need to be there. So I can guarantee you what will happen. If they're not funded, and then it's May of next year, we will be asked to fund those positions. And if we don't fund those positions, it will be our fault for not doing what we should be doing for those students. And that will be a large impact on the county level, where the state is supposed to be funding these positions, and they should step up and do what they're supposed to be doing and should have been doing all along. Anything else you want to add? Okay. I knew the finance person from Cabarrus County Schools would agree with me on my comments, even though I didn't ask her about them in advance. But let's be fair. Those positions should have been funded a long time ago.
If I could piggyback on that, what it may do too is buy us some time to continue to harp on that flexibility on that transportation tax. You know, because that was, I think when the legislators were here that day, I think they heard loud and clear that was a big thing that would help us out to get that hurdle. If, you know, if we're sitting here right back where we are, as Liz just talked about next year, maybe that's the one caveat to the whole thing is we just continue to pursue that.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, we'll move on to item 3.2, a presentation of the State Transportation Improvement Program. And we have Warren Cooksey with us. Welcome.
Good to be here.
And I'm going to interject before he even starts. As you know, I am our representative on the Cabarrus-Rowan Metropolitan Planning Organization, or as I like to call it, the Roads and Bridges Group. And so we, instead of me doing a out and about, this is a lot more detailed information and it's better suited for our meeting. And Warren does a very good job of keeping the MPO boards updated on what's going on, and there's a lot going on in Cabarrus County. We should all be very, very thankful for the impacts we have in Cabarrus County. And we should all understand that the next while we are going to be dealing with lots of issues that are as a result of construction. And at the end, we're all going to be very happy. But until then, you need to plan how you're going to go around Concord Mills area because there's not going to be an easy way to get there or to Cox Mill Elementary School or Cox Mill High School, just FYI. Pretty much any way in or out is going to have a lot of construction, but he's done a great job. We had a meeting last week and we were fortunate to meet the new Secretary of Transportation. So he has been in the area and is well aware of our needs and our current projects and future projects. So I wanted to say thank you for everything you've done to educate me, and I hope that the board members and the public will enjoy this information that you're going to get today, because it is a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chairman, members of the board and county staff. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I chuckled a bit during the previous presentation on the reference to job descriptions, because one of my job descriptions is work with local elected officials about transportation matters as they pertain to NCDOT. But I don't speak with county commissioners often, since counties aren't in the road maintenance business in this state. So this is a rare privilege for me to be able to reach out to y'all and let you know the sorts of things that are going on. So let's dive right on into it, although I do have to question, I could question several things you said, Commissioner Poole, particularly things about me, but I don't know what you mean about when the construction ends.
That's fine.
We just go from one project to another, so let's dive.
That particular area, there will be some roads construction will end on at some point in time, and then we will just shift you to some other projects. How's that?
There we go. That's it. It never ends. So the main topic for us today is how the map of Cabarrus County will be changing with projects that are coming along, both currently and within the next 10 years. But before I get to that main event, I do want to talk a bit about how that 10-year plan, it's called the State Transportation Improvement Program, or STIP, gets developed. And before I do that, everyone likes to know what's going on with the Orange Barrels today. So I'm going to start off with a quick overview of where we stand today for major projects in current road construction in Cabarrus County. We've got a little project out by Midland to improve Bill McGee Road, to take it from Wallace Road to an industrial site. We have it's been on track for a number of years now, the George Lyles Parkway extension. Everyone was kind of happy when we opened a stretch of that up a little early a couple of years ago, and we are on track. The contract completion date for that project is February of 2018. If the contractor finishes it early, we will all be happy. But I tend to try to share contract completion dates because that's the best number I have about predicting the future. Moving on to the same general area, there's an intersection improvement, quick intersection improvement underway at NC 49 and Style Road. That should wrap up by June, summertime at least. Main effort of that's about eliminating left turns from Style to 49, redirecting those movements to be a right turn with a U-turn. It's a fairly standard safety improvement we're putting in across the state when you have a 4-lane divided highway that people want to turn left on without, and so we're working on making that improvement. recently let to contract the widening of NC3 from Kannapolis Parkway to Loop Road. That is in the utility relocation phase currently. We always look forward to utility relocation to go along swiftly. It rarely does. So keep your eye on that one. The contract completion date for this project is May of 2020. And then DeRuyter Road widening, as Commissioner Poole mentioned, from Concord Mills Boulevard, a little south of Concord Mills Boulevard actually, up to Poplar Tent Road. That has also been let to contract. That is also in the utility relocation phase. That contract completion date is actually a month earlier, April of 2020, according to contract. Things can happen in between now and then, though. I would like to point out all the numbers there you see, we can't do anything without numbering it. So those numbers just indicate how we identify them in our transportation improvement program. Did I forget about I-85? I guess I almost forgot about I-85. Yeah, that's going on too, in case you hadn't noticed. And in addition to widening and improving the 3 interchanges in the construction corridor, the US 29601 interchange, Dale Earnhardt Boulevard interchange, and Lane Street interchange, there's also some additional improvements going on with Wyankoff School Road, South Main Street, Kannapolis Highway, that Commissioner Poole thought I should share the specifics about that so you can kind of see what the future of that area is going to be. So here's our project map, specifically there at Wyankoff School Road. What we're looking at for reconfiguration is here's roughly where that railroad crossing is today. That is going away. And we've got a major realignment here that comes to a roundabout that will, if your destination is Ridge Avenue, not labeled on here, and you're coming from Wyankoff School Road, you'll go around the roundabout, go under South Main Street, under the railroad track, and come back around. The Ridge Avenue Bridge will be no more under the reconfiguration of this project, and anyone coming from the other side of 85 whose destination is Ridge Avenue will come up Kannapolis Highway, South Main Street, take the left, go around the roundabout, go back under, and get to Ridge Avenue that way. So that's a major reconfiguration, but it's all about safety and improving traffic operations, particularly given that railroad crossing. Yes. Okay.
Wyankoff School Road,
Yep.
Wyankoff Elementary School
Yep.
is right.
Right there. Right there. One of the others.
Yeah, all the
Yeah.
parking.
All the parking. There it is. Yeah.
Yes. So, and then if you go, which I do every Saturday, if you travel the road, you're going to see, this is why I was asking about it, because you can see some.
This bridge is under construction.
Yeah, that bridge is under construction, and if you look carefully, please make sure that you're the passenger in the car, not the driver. But you can see underneath the bridge where it's leveled out. I noticed this Saturday where it's leveled out, and that bit of coming underneath the bridge is completely illogical to me. But it started to make sense when I noticed where it was flattened out. So it's going to, I mean, when people see that, they're going to, be really surprised on what the heck they're doing to try to get around. But as we all know, that at-grade crossing is a dangerous one, and this is how they're getting around it. So it's going to be interesting. The school system, I know you guys know about it because of the roundabout and everything that's going to impact the school site. And then, but you ought to drive that way. If you haven't lately, drive that way. Main Street or 29A, whichever way you want to call it, like you're going to go get your driver's license, which the driver's license place is it the white building?
I haven't been to it. I couldn't tell you.
Okay. Yes. I think the white building is the driver's license plate. No, it can't be. It's got to be over this way. It's in between. It's in between the two. Right. Yeah, it's in between the two where you see parking there. That building, yes, thank you. That's the driver's license. But please make sure somebody else is driving because, otherwise you're not going to be able to see everything. But it is a very interesting layout.
And
I'll put it that way.
that'll work.
Not have my microphone on at all for that.
Again, I appreciate you reinforcing that, the goal here is how do you get across the railroad tracks safely? And anytime you've got an at-grade crossing, there's a safety concern because railroads and cars are not a good match. So this will get that crossing to be under the railway, just so happens to go under South Main Street as well, and that will change everyone's travel pattern for a while, but the folks who learn to drive around it, once this is done, will just think it's the normal thing. To the south of 85, We've got some other projects around the South Main Street. I keep hearing people call it South Main Street. The street signs say Kannapolis Highway, and that throws me as a non-native of Cabarrus. I'm native of North Carolina. But anyway, here south of 85, here's the change of configuration. Right now, the road goes under the railroad track in a really narrow bridge and meets up with 29601 here. In the future, that will be a pedestrian path, and the actual road will go all the way down, go over the train track, and meet up with the mall over here. And so that will have a dramatic improvement on traffic flow and safety as well, and also just getting through here. In a longer presentation I have on this topic, just so happens that Google Street View had a truck under that bridge, and it was such a tight fit. So I left that out in the interest of time, but here's what the southern configuration is. Commissioner?
So the bottom left-hand corner is the bus.
Oh, yes.
That's CK Transit. Okay, and then just above where we currently go
Would you like
underneath.
the pointer?
No, where it says railroad.
Yeah.
That's the service station, and just above that is McDonald's. And if you go up to the next intersection, you have my favorite place, Starbucks, to give you an idea. And where that's coming out is where they have bulldozed, that's at the hospital parking deck, so that goes straight into the mall. So you're gonna have to turn at the mall, and you can see the construction is very easy to see where that overpass is gonna be over the railroad tracks, and then it'll parallel and come behind the houses that are currently on Main Street or 29A. I used to call it 29A.
Okay.
So that also, and let me see, somewhere around where the word, right underneath the E of Blythe, somewhere around in there should be the EMT station. Isn't that right, Jonathan?
That's right. Station 1's there, and so we've had, Alan Thompson looked at this very early on when they were doing design to make sure that would work for them. And actually, because of the access to the hospital, it's probably a better route for them. We'll need to juggle some things, just as we are with the bridge closures. There's going to be some bridge closures with I-85 widening.
Okay.
Got it covered?
It's
We're
coming.
gonna get that.
We're juggling some of that stuff about providing emergency services, but they're working with us very well on that.
And is there a completion for this, completion date?
This project has had some challenges with utility relocations, just the sheer amount of complexity, plus we piled on the Brantley Road Bridge over Lake Fisher onto the same contractor. So right now, the goal is to have the main line of 85 completely open with all the new lanes by December of 2018. That's the goal we're working to. When this configuration will all be finished is not something I'd prefer to comment on at this point. So it won't be before December 2018, I can tell you that. It's one of the things I learned early on in this job is be very cautious if you're more than a year out, because a lot of things can happen inside of a year that can change things. And again, this one, just the level of complexity, so much being done, and as I mentioned, right-of-way acquisition, utility relocations don't always follow the schedules we'd prefer. So that's going forward. And to that point, in order to get to that December 2018 opening for the entirety of the 8-lane section to match up with the 8-lane section opening up in Rowan County, we are working on scheduling closures of the overpasses, not the interchanges, but the, pressed the wrong button, but the overpasses of Concord Lake Road, Center Grove Road, Brantley Road, and Moose Road, beginning late spring, early summer of this year, with the idea that if we can have those closed for about a year, it can accelerate the work being done on the 85 portion on the main line to get that all finished up by December of 2018. But the most important aspect of that has been, as Jonathan was alluding to, the coordination with emergency responders to be able to make sure that if we do wind up closing, having all 4 of those closed at one point at the same time, that we can adjust for emergency response for this very, very busy area. But be on the lookout. We'll issue, when we're ready to do it, we'll issue the press releases. We'll send out extra notification, in fact, on these because it's such a big impact. But again, the goal is if we can do this, we can line up the opening of the main line by late 2018.
Hey,
All right.
can you go back?
Yep.
Can you repeat the names of the road, the overpasses that are going to be closed?
It's all 4 of them in the project area: Concord Lake Road, Center Grove Road, Brantley Road, Moose Road, and there would be posted detours to send you to other routes. That's another element of the conversation to have with the police. What are the best traffic flows? And some are obvious. If we're going to close Moose Road, then Lane Street is going to be the detour for anyone trying to get from one side of 85 to the other. When it comes down to Concord Lake Road, you've got Dale Earnhardt Boulevard, you've got 29601. Different people are going to want to go different routes. So that's another element, like I said, to talk about. But the key element is making sure all the emergency responders are comfortable with this for the year or so that they would be closed. And be on the lookout. We'll give plenty of notice.
So Winecall School Road,
Mhm.
that one will stay open, or that one will be closed? That's,
Oh, I'm sorry, that one won't close.
Okay.
Yeah, that.
So
yeah,
anything-
South Main Street, 29A will stay open.
okay.
Is not subject to this. It's these
Not
four.
29A, this is the one. So if you come past, I
Oh,
didn't
I'm
mean
talking about
Winecall School.
talking about
Yeah.
overpasses on 85.
Yeah, it comes, if you go
Oh.
where,
Let me just bow to superior local knowledge and say, these are the four.
okay.
If I didn't say it in these four.
So 73 is fine,
Yeah.
because the construction's been up to there, and then the next one up is an overpass.
Right.
Which is, isn't it still Winecall School Road?
Yes.
And that one will still
that's
be
the one,
fine,
yes, right there.
correct?
Yeah, that'll be
So-
fine. So basically, between 29601 and just around the county line, so
Into the
that
county line.
section.
Yeah.
That's these four: Concord Lake Road, Center Grove Road, Brantley Road, Moose Road. They likely, all four won't happen at the same time, but by the time all the dominoes fall on them, there will be a period of time when all four are closed. Again, assuming all of this works out, and we can get the schedule acceleration that we're aiming for with this, with these closures.
Right. So there'll be pain, but it'll be good in the end.
Yeah.
And there's still connection between Concord and Kannapolis. It's
Yep.
just that some of those may be more traffic-related backups. When you close four, then there's
Yep.
obviously going to be some issues with going back and forth and getting over 85.
Yep.
So those I really want to make sure everybody was well aware of, because we will get phone calls on those.
Yes, yeah, and we're expecting them to, but again, we are on high alert for notification. We've been on high alert once the idea came out for the coordination with the various agencies, but we want the public to have, plenty of time when the contractor is ready to do it. We've got to get the word out. And we'll use multiple distribution channels through y'all, through the chamber, through as many as we can to make sure that folks know. And again, there will be posted detours where the signs should go up in anticipation of the closure, so that folks who drive those routes regularly will see when it's going to happen. But as for now, in terms of a date and a time, don't have that at this point. Alrighty, so that's our current update of the major one, but of course, we also have other bridge projects underway. We do intersection improvements, we help with sidewalks, there's resurfacing, none of which I had time to go into, but all of which is occurring. So now we shift over to how we get to a state transportation improvement program, which is a little involved, but I'm also running out of time.
No,
Yeah.
just a
Okay.
real quick question.
Oh,
You
yes.
just to touch on, we're still getting questions too. You talked about the DeRida Road
Yep.
deading, or the project would stop just south of Concord Mills Boulevard.
Yep.
Will it eventually go to 485, or is that to the county line? What is that, what's that stop?
That's a future slide. The
Okay.
project
I
is
didn't-
currently
okay, I thought you were
defined
finished talking
is
about
the
those.
project that folks will see being worked upon, and I'm
Right.
sorry to be flipped there.
No, that's
But
fine.
it's, I tried to cover everything in an eventual slide, and
Okay,
it just
how about-
happens.
is there
But the
another
existing
slide?
project, yes, there will come a time for
Right.
that, but the existing project that folks should expect to see work begin on is just Poplar Tent Road to slightly south of Concord Mills Boulevard. I mean, the basic project definition is Poplar Tent Road to Concord Mills Boulevard, but
Right.
you've got to taper it down a bit.
Okay.
And for the future, there will be a future project.
All right, do you have a future slide on the gap on the west side bypass at Stow Road between the intersection that you're getting ready to fix on 49 and the bridge?
Not really.
Okay.
But I can address that when we get to that point as well.
Okay, all right.
Because, and I will be able to address it better once I've been through this section on how we do this stuff these days. This is the cover of the draft State Transportation Improvement Program, released in January for basically a 5-month comment period that is underway currently. It all begins for us with realizing that the state is divided for us into these 14 highway divisions. Here we are in Cabarrus comfortably in Division 10. And I would also point out, for reasons that will become evident momentarily, that we are paired with Division 8 to form a region. Each of the 14 divisions is paired with another to form a region. So 7 regions, 14 divisions. This is kind of how we look at the state when it comes to operations and maintenance of the state highway system. We have partners in this work that makes the map this much more complicated, namely the boundaries of the Metropolitan and Rural Planning Organizations, including the Cabarrus-Rowan Metropolitan Planning Organization, conveniently located in Cabarrus and Rowan counties. You'll note that it crosses a division boundary, it crosses a regional boundary. That becomes significant as well. But planning and delivering projects is a partnership effort. All MPOs exist because Congress wants them to exist. They have voting members from, in the case of Cabarrus-Rowan, the 16 cities, towns, and the 2 counties, plus the 2 Board of Transportation members from the 2 divisions involved in Cabarrus-Rowan. And this is the group charged by federal law with identifying the major regional highway projects that need to be done. Anything that federal money touches, the MPO has to approve and work and develop. When it comes to delivering them, though, that's when NCDOT steps in, led by our board, established by the General Assembly, 19 members of our board appointed by the governor, 14 by division and 5 at large. They oversee operations. They provide us the policy guidance to carry out state law in taking projects from MPOs, crunching the numbers to determine what can be funded, when it can be funded, and how it can get delivered. So this is the core of the partnership of an effort that actually involves numerous entities all across the state and, of course, our important partners with the Federal Highway Administration. But as one of our partners with FHWA has pointed out to us, there is no one entity in charge of the highway system in the United States. Lots of moving parts, each with a role to play. And it's this partnership that gets us where we're going in Cabarrus and Rowan counties. Just to let you know a bit about our budget last year, fiscal year 16, we have, our money basically falls into 2 funds. The Highway Fund, $2.9 billion, that's operations, maintenance, some small construction projects. Our major construction fund, though, is the Highway Trust Fund. We have about $1.5 billion a year into it. So just to let you know, the last time there was a call for projects statewide, the total estimate of all the projects that MPOs and RPOs across the state said they needed was above $55 billion. And we have $1.5 billion a year in the Highway Trust Fund. So that's why ranking is very important and how we do it is very important. Won't go into a lot of the history of how we did it. Many may have heard of the equity formula, but I'll use this chart from your neighbors to the southwest. The equity formula governed how we allocated transportation dollars from 1989 to 2013. And by 2010, you could see where Cabarrus in Region E fell if you were looking at the equity formula per capita allocation statewide. These are the regions from east through the Piedmont to west. These were the concerns being expressed about how we used to do things. We don't do it this way anymore, which is why I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the history. What we do now, as of 2013, is we follow a law called Strategic Transportation Investments, or STI for short. And this blew apart the equity formula and divided the Highway Trust Fund into 3 separate categories of funding. 40% of the money goes to statewide mobility projects, interstates, most U.S. routes, some NC routes that they're on the National Strategic Defense Highway Network. The focus here is bottlenecks, congestion, relieving those, and only these types of roads are eligible for this category of funding. The next category, 30% of funds, regional impact. You've seen the regions, you know the region you're in. This is a focus of improving connectivity within regions. All the remaining U.S. routes, all the NC routes are funded out of here. And if there's something in statewide mobility that people can't get funded in statewide mobility, they can try in the regional impact if they want to. These funds are divided among the 7 regions per capita. So the more population a region has, obviously, the more money it gets. The remaining 30% divided into division needs. Those local needs, your local roads, the secondary road network. These are divided equally amongst the 14 divisions. And that's all I'll say about that, but that's how it gets allocated statewide. Again, anything in the previous 2 categories that didn't get funded under the system could get funded out of division needs if locals want to do that. Here's how, and all of these categories fall in all 6 modes of transportation the state support. It's not just roads, it's also aviation, bike ped, the 2nd largest ferry system in the country, transit, and rail. We provide funding, either the dominant source or a supplemental source for all 6. By the way, the internal slide deck for all this for NCDOT is 90 slides long, so you are getting a very top-level view. But I think it's significant because people ask that question a lot. Well, how does this happen? Why this road and why another? And this is what you can tell them now. It's a data-driven process. At the statewide mobility level, there are 6 formulas applied to every statewide road project submitted from across the state. The projects are ranked based on how they score in each of these formulas, each weighted slightly differently. And the top-ranked projects get funded. The projects don't get voted on individually. Nobody trades one project for another. If the data say fund it, it gets funded. At the regional level, there are 5 formulas that have various weights, but they account for only 70% of the ranking. 30% comes from local input, not state level, not the state board, local input, and I'll define that a little more closely in the next slide. But first I'll point out that at the division level, half the ranking is based on these 5 formulas, weighted accordingly. The other half based on local input. And that local input is your MPO and the division engineer for the division. In this case, our division engineer, Lewis Mitchell, based in Albemarle. So a local NCDOT division engineer weighs in, as do the MPOs and RPOs from across the state on those regional and division tier projects. And they can't just do it willy-nilly. They have to adopt a formal methodology, much like the formulas that you saw in this setup. Each MPO, each RPO, each division engineer has to say, this is the method I'll use to assign points to projects. It doesn't have to be the same as this, but it does have to be a method. So again, there's not the same kind of horse trading about projects that used to happen. It is a data-driven method process. I used to note that under the equity formula, it was a fairly simple process to describe, but it wasn't very transparent. Projects that got votes got funded. This system is extraordinarily transparent. I can tell you how any project scores according to any formula, why one project is in, one project is out. But please do not expect it to be simple. It is much more complex, but I can go through it. If you want to know more about what's in the draft STIP, just search NCDOT draft STIP, take you right to our page, or you can email me and I can help you with that too. Now for the fun part, the highlight, what's in it? What are the major projects that are in the future of Cabarrus County? Well, as alluded to earlier, in addition to DeRuyter Road, we've got the Concord Mills Flyover with construction funding beginning fiscal year 2018. Not going to do this with every project, but I do want to show some visualizations for this one because it is such an odd project. It's not a usual widening project. This is a flyover ramp to replace the 2 left-hand turn lanes from Concord Mills Boulevard into Concord Mills. If you do any study of traffic signal phasing, left turns just really throw things off, especially when you got as many people turning left as are turning here. So what the proposal is to construct this flyover to take people up, over, and into the mall without having to stop for a traffic signal and without having these folks have to stop to wait for all those left turns. Here's an example of what it looks like at street level from a comparable flyover in another city. This will likely be a minimum 2-year type project because for obvious reasons we are not really going to affect access to the mall during the Christmas shopping season. So we may get all we can do before Christmas of 2018 or 2018 and then get the rest of it done before Christmas of 2019. So there's Concord Mills Flyover. 2020 funding is in place for constructing improvements to the NC3 US 209-601 intersection. And again, here are these tip numbers if you want to track them down. 2022, big year for us. The widening of NC 73 will begin. Now for Cabarrus County, that's US 29 to the county line, but there are companion projects that take this widening all the way through Mecklenburg County over to Business 16 in Lincoln County. This is a 27-mile-long corridor that will be taken from where it's 2 lanes today to 4 lanes beginning in 2022. Also, to the question from a moment ago, here is the project to widen Odell School Road from Concord Mills to I-485. Funding available in 2022. Yes, there's a companion project in Mecklenburg County to take it to 45. So this was that slide I promised that shows the completion with funding available in 2022. So this will have its funding available possibly while the Dorada project is still under construction, since that's got well, actually, it'll be a couple of years later, because that contract completion date is actually April of 2020. Then, moving on to 2024, realign, this is a small intersection project, but it rose to the level of TIP analysis anyway. Realigning US 29 and Union Cemetery Road intersection. Again, it looks small and compared with others, but I suspect it will have a big impact. Intersection improvements often do. And then 2025, a couple of other big ones, widening NC3 from Dale Earnhardt Boulevard south to US 601, and widening Poplar Tent Road from Dorada Road to NC 73. And there's, in Mecklenburg County, companion projects, one for the Cabarrus part, one for the Mecklenburg part. But that's the main future for the area, and I can give you a copy of this slide, Commissioner.
Oh, yeah, but I can tweet it out.
Oh, all righty. I forgot about the Twitters. Now, overlaying the current and future projects I've talked about, you can again see just what kind of impact to the roadmap of Cabarrus County we're talking about. And again, I really didn't get into a lot on the bridges, the intersections, the sidewalk projects, and resurfacing that will be going on as well. Next steps for the State Transportation Improvement Program through May 16th, we are receiving comments. In June, you'll see adoption by the Board of Transportation. Likely in August, unless you choose a different month, CRMPO will adopt its segment. Every MPO adopts its segment of the TIP that involves federal funding. September, we'll receive confirmation by the Federal Highway Administration that what the state board passed is the same as what CRMPO passed for Cabarrus and Rowan. And by fall, we'll start it all over again in a call for projects for the FY 2020, FY 2029 State Improvement Program, because although it's a 10-year document, we update it every 2 years. So that's what Commissioner Poole works on with the Cabarrus Rowan MPO. That's what your NCDOT is delivering, and we appreciate the partnership. Thank you for the time and the opportunity to give you a little education about how all this comes to be.
So, Mike, to comment when you asked about Stout Road.
There you go.
So, he knows I'm going to do something.
Yeah.
So, I've become legendary, if you will, with the MPO board about asking about Stout Road. It used to be I asked about Raging Ridge Road. That one is open.
Mm-hmm.
Is it opened?
Yes. Oh, it's open.
Okay, punch
Yeah.
list done?
Don't think.
Almost.
I think the punch list is done, but
Still
it's
some
open.
punch list,
I
but-
drove on it today in preparation for this meeting, so yes.
There you go.
Raging Ridge is open.
So, because I have been asking about Stout Road for a while. So one of the things is because it's so data-driven that, I'm going to forget what the name of the study was that you do to the traffic study or the number of cars.
The congestion numbers just aren't there.
Yeah, the congestion numbers. So because it was looking at 609 and, was it Moorhead at the time? Because that section.
You've got to do a comparison.
Yeah, the section had not been opened yet. Now, George Lyles dumps into Stout Road, but at that point in time, that section wasn't open, so you couldn't figure out what the traffic, and the demand in that area was very small, because nobody knew, if you weren't from here, you didn't know to drive on Roberta to get to Stout, or vice versa, you know. So have you already done another traffic numbers?
We haven't done updated traffic.
So-
Well, I mean, we'll do it for the next round, but it did not, we did it for the last one. When it was submitted for scoring in the fall of 2015, that section was scored, the proposed continued extension of George Lyles Parkway, basically to take over Style Road to 49. And it did not score as well as other segments of Poplar Tent Road that didn't get funded either. I mean, I showed you the segment of Poplar Tent from Dorada up to 73 in Mecklenburg scored well enough to be funded, but other segments of Poplar Tent, say from 85 out to 29 and all, did not score well enough to be funded, but they scored better than George Lyles Parkway extension.
Right. So in the next round, they will see the traffic, which has increased because of George Lyles being opened up to Roberta. And so the next round of numbers should come in better. And then they can look at that next section, finishing that section of Style Road all the way out to 29. And then there, with the change at 29, where there won't be, because we've talked about this, where there won't be left-hand turns at Style Road, that's a good investment. It won't have to be redone because of how that's being, at 49, how that's being redone with the left-hand road. So were you going to?
No, I thought you were talking about 49.
Well, they're gonna do-
It's now in 49.
It's
where
now
it
in
says the
49
left-hand
is where
turn
they're going to
sign.
make, instead of having left-hand turns,
Yeah.
you're going to loop around. So it will be, that will be good, and it will be positioned so that once that Stow Road gets widened, 49 is still going to be okay to handle what's going to happen there. We hope. We're planning on
The
that.
intersection improvement will be satisfactory for its benefit to cost ratio.
And it is interesting on this board because I've learned a lot about Rowan County. We don't have anything up here about Rowan County because we're not there, though, obviously, but we have a lot of Rowan County residents who watch this show. And so my other joke with the Rowan County people would be on Old Beatty's Ford Road, which if any of you are in that part of our county and you go up, you notice it does not, if there's a wreck in that 5-mile span on 85, if it's southbound, Rowan County has to respond, even if it's in Cabarrus County. And if it's northbound, Cabarrus County has to respond, even if it's in Rowan County, because you can't get to it otherwise. So Old Beatty's Ford was, everybody and their brother said that wasn't going to happen, and now it's going to happen. So that will end up having an economic boom, I think, for Rowan County once that interchange gets put in. So the two counties have worked very well together, I think. We've learned about each other, and we do tend to help. And even the Dorado Road one was split into two different projects, and the Rowan County folks said, yeah, it makes sense to go ahead and kind of advance some money in there to make sure that the whole section could be done in this time. So there are a lot of things like that that's been really nice about this group, to have Rowan and Cabarrus folks working together on it. And then the other one you asked about, which is Dorado going into Mecklenburg, we had to go to a different group. We had to go to Mumpo to work on that one to get them to understand that the backside of Concord Mills was important to get that widened too. So it is an interesting, I like being on the board. I am the current chair for this year. We alternate between Rowan County and Cabarrus County. Next year's chair will be Ryan Dayvault from Kannapolis City, because they're the only one that straddles both counties. So anyway, it's been kind of interesting. In your package, commissioners, if you keep going past that one, you can see the report that we get at all of our meetings, and there's a lot on there about bridge projects that are being done, and you can get more details about various projects in Cabarrus County. Some of the status numbers on the end might not be perfect anymore, but it'll give you an idea of all the things that we are fortunate to have happening in Cabarrus County.
In particular, the bridge list, I think, is pretty impressive. I could do whole presentations on bridge work. It's just astounding, the stuff that goes on there.
Right, well, we very much appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. A lot of folks are very interested in the information you've given. As I listened to some of it, I tried to evaluate whether I would rather know in advance or just accept it when it comes. Some of the things we're not looking forward to, but the end will make it worthwhile. But we certainly appreciate you coming and talking with us.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Great. We're going to make a slight adjustment on our agenda and move item 3.6 up next, and that is seamless government website redesign. And we're happy to have Debbie Brannon and a group of folks supporting her. If you would like for us to move you back down to the bottom so you can stay and endure the rest of our meeting, we'll be, just say so. We'll be happy to do
Whatever
it.
he needs for you.
Yeah. Proceed.
Well, good afternoon. I want to thank you for making accommodations for us. Seamless Gov's going to be on site the next 2 days, meeting with all our departments to talk about our website redesign. And they were gracious enough to fly in a little early so they could meet the commissioners and do a little presentation. And I wanted to give the Board of Commissioners the opportunity to meet with them and express any of your goals and requirements for the website design. So I will let them introduce themselves and give their presentation.
So I'm going to be giving kind of the overview of really who we are, what we do, and why we're going to be here first. But my name is Ted Lord, and I'm a government solutions consultant at Seamless Gov.
Yeah. My name is Asher Rosenfeld, and I'm a government experience consultant at Seamless Gov. To kind of explain what that means. If you know about design, you know what UX is, user experience, and it's how users use interfaces to accomplish tasks. At Seamless Gov, we talk about GX, government experience. So we talk about how users use digital interfaces to accomplish tasks with their government. That's really what we specialize in, is digital government interactions. So that's what we're thinking about every time we design something, and the type of strengths that we're going to try to bring to you guys.
Thank you very much for having us today. My name is Vincent Vitolo. Excuse me. I'm an account manager at Seamless Gov. I manage Cabarrus County here, as well as Guilford County and Catawba County next to us.
So, why are we here? Seamless Gov is really how we view it as a government innovation company. We partner with governments to create custom, data-driven digital interfaces and automate business processes. Now, for those of you who are present during the RFP presentation and had seen some other materials we've sent over, you kind of have a better idea of what that means. For a lot of the other people here, in your head, you're probably thinking, what on earth does that mean? And what does that mean for us specifically? And basically, we are going to be creating a beautiful new website for Cabarrus County. And not only just the website portion of it, we're going to empower citizens and allow you to give them the option to now go onto the website, and hopefully we will be able to guide them exactly where they need to go. Not hopefully, we will be guiding them exactly where they need to go based upon your analytics. And not only give them the information they're looking for, but actually allow them to submit any form or application through the website from any device with e-signatures, payments, and attachments from the comfort of their homes, because it seems like from the previous presentation, half the roads and bridges are going to be closed at some point soon, so hopefully we can help you out with that. But as in terms of Seamless Gov as a company, it seems that you've realized that during the RFP process, kind of the upper hand we have in terms of other website design firms is that before we even began building municipal websites, we did focus on government forms and that whole aspect. We work with hundreds of governments. I mean, we work with Boston, Seattle, the biggest cities, right down to little tiny towns with barely 1,000 people. And it's interesting because what we've come to realize very quickly is that no matter what size you are and no matter how many citizens that you're serving, they have the same problems. And what we started seeing more and more is that governments were trying to, I guess, solve universal problems individually. And they were doing that in very different ways. So something that we're focusing on is actually coming in, helping governments solve their own problems, derive best practices from each experience we have, and create scalable solutions that any government can use and benefit from. And really, that's what we're here to do with you. This meeting now, this is why we're here for the next 2 days, is primarily the website redesign. So we're going to be talking to all the departments within Cabarrus County. Ash is actually going to touch on that shortly. But also, while we're here, Vincent is going to be speaking with departments on really what form processes they do want to automate, what they want to focus on first, what they get the highest traffic of. And the website eventually is going to be shaped around that to make whatever citizens go to the website most often to get the easiest things to actually access and accomplish online. So I am now going to hand it off to Asher so he can talk about a little bit more why we're here. Does he need to be closer to the mic, or is he okay there? I'm not sure.
Yeah, if you want to just turn it.
Sure.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Teddy. So I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the specifics of the website, kind of a little overview of how we started. Like Teddy said, we got started, the company Seamless Gov, in the form automation world, and as I said, what we quickly realized is what we were doing was really creating beautiful digital experiences. So actually our CEO, Jonathan, who heads up the website division, he was part of a Code for America study that looked at municipal and city websites and looked at tens of thousands of these websites and put together these best practices. On top of that, he spent 10 years running a digital agency, creating websites. So putting these two skill sets together, we realized that we wanted to bring this new digital interface aspect to our company. So we started building websites, and it's been going really well. We actually have 3 kind of main points of methodology that we practice that I'm going to tell you a little bit about. So the first one is having a modern design. And one of the first things I like to mention when I talk about modern design is actually designing for mobile first. I'm sure I'm not the only person here who uses their cell phone to do most of their browsing. So we look at your analytics, we look at how many people are actually doing their browsing about the city services and the city website on their phones, and we make sure we take that into account when we're designing your site. And in terms of modern design, we practice something called a Google material design, where we really try to simplify the user experience and really focus on calls to action on your website. So one of the things you're going to be seeing during this transition is you're actually going to see a lot of that text go away, go deeper into the website, and you're going to see like larger calls to action, larger buttons, larger calls that are very they're visual, and they make sure they focus on what the citizen is trying to do and how to get them there as efficiently as possible. When we really, again, try to simplify it, take away that text, I wish I had one of the slides that I brought up that I don't have on me today is one of your old sites with all the text and all the buttons and all the things you might see on that site, and then a new version of what that page might look like, which is just really simplified and it's really clear. So we're going to be working with your department heads or their representatives. We're going to be seeing how to make those calls to action even stronger, and how to take away the noise and how to get citizens to where they need to go. That kind of brings me into the second pillar of our methodology, which is navigation and analytics. Again, we really focus on getting that citizen to where they need to go. And that could also mean internal staff as well who are using the website. We look at your analytics, and we're really excited to work with Debbie and her team to kind of dive into why citizens are going to certain places on their current website, what that means to you internally in terms of the services you provide, and how to group them, how to name them so that they're intuitive, how to make it, again, really easy to get people to do what they need to be doing. And then the third thing we do is actually on the back end with our content management system, our CMS. And the CMS that we provide is really important to us because we focus on that being user-friendly to the people that are updating the website. Again, in a lot of the older CMSs, they'll be a lot more complicated. They're focused on modules. But the way we build our CMS is that, A, it's dynamic across the site. So you only have to update a page once, and it automatically filters into the site right away. So for example, that could mean if you create a news item and you tag it to a certain department, it automatically shows up on that department, but you might also tag it to a service somewhere else on the website, and it'll automatically show up there. And we engineer that from the beginning so that your entire site is dynamic. And we make it really easy to fill out. So instead of designing a whole new page, it'll basically be like filling out a questionnaire for that person who's creating a new page. Or if you have to create a new news item or a new announcement, it's going to be really simple, like filling out a questionnaire, and it automatically creates a beautiful page that we've already done styling for. So we've already done the standardization of fonts and colors and imagery so that from the get-go, you're automatically going to have standardization throughout the site. So those are the three things that we really try to take into account when we're doing your design. A little overview of what we're going to be doing for the next few days is we're going to be kicking off, setting goals, learning about what's most important to you. We're going to be studying those navigation and analytics and learning how to group things and how to work with Debbie and her team to make sure that we're building what needs to be built. And then we're going to be talking to all the department heads or their representatives, and we're going to be listening and asking questions and learning what are the most important things for each of their service centers, how we can pare down and simplify each of their pages, and how we can kind of create this comprehensive plan for designing your site. So that's kind of the website overview. I'm going to pass off to Vincent, who's going to be working on those form and business processes, and he's going to be your account manager there.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, I'm the account manager for the county government here in Cabarrus. My two colleagues did a great job explaining what we do, so I'll keep it brief. Basically, with the forms that we have and the process that we build, we make it easier for your government to process different types of forms. So as I mentioned, we will be meeting with different department heads to make sure that this platform is utilized across all departments. And then any other questions that you guys have throughout the 2 days that we're here, feel free to just ask us, and we'll be able to help you from there.
And I think one of the things with the form solution that I really want to hit home for everyone is that it's not just, I mean, the biggest thing is obviously having the citizens be able to come online and do those services, but it's twofold in the sense that once that's submitted, that goes to the staff. And we want to make that process a lot easier as well. So previously, where a lot of forms are paper-based and you'll have to sign off and have it go to another department or scan back in and email, and everyone does it a little bit differently based upon, their services that they provide. We want to standardize that, and now everything will be electronic. Once Vincent will help them set up a form, as soon as citizens start submitting it, it goes to the correct department, to the correct people within each department. Once that person signs off, and perhaps it has to go to another department for approval, it goes immediately routed to their email. So it's going to make your lives a lot easier as well. It's going to cut down on paper, which is huge. Most of the governments that we see utilizing it across all their departments, we urge them to do some type of analysis in terms of how much paper are we saving, even down to the ink in the envelopes, because you're also now going to be avoiding that snail mail type of communication, and it keeps transparency open, and we even give citizens the ability to, if they want, sign in and actually see where their forms are. So they're not in the dark. They're not wondering, oh, has this been approved? Have they even gotten it? They can go in and check themselves, and it's really been an amazing experience for us to see the difference it makes to citizens, and even just the easier it becomes for staff to actually process these types of things. So obviously we didn't have a full presentation because I did want this to be more conversational. Does anyone have any questions, curious about anything in particular that we would love to touch on that?
I don't have any questions, but if somehow your enthusiasm can come through on the website, then we're gold.
That's the plan. That's it.
As you saw, our motto on the previous slide is "Government is beautiful." Half the time when we say that, we get chuckles, but it's something we definitely believe. We do have stickers. We'll be giving them out to all the departments. We make the joke that maybe don't put it on your car.
Put it on your cubicle.
Put it on
We
the
see
cubicle.
that everywhere.
I also have a "Government is Beautiful" T-shirt that I wear day to day in the gym, and I do get looks. But
Good.
it is definitely something that we believe, and that's what we're trying to work towards every single day.
Excellent. Other questions? This is slightly, in my opinion, similar to some of the road projects. Let me know when you're finished.
So maybe one of the things I should have mentioned with the design methodology is how we can execute on that speed. We have been bringing soft internal launches to other people within about 30 days. So once we kind of have the style and the design set up, working with the other company that we're going to be working with, we'll be able to get you a site a lot faster than you'll expect. So I'm excited to blow your expectations out of the water.
It'll be done before 2020. Is what we're
Excellent, that's great.
I will
No,
say
and
that-
what I meant by that was, I have great trust in your knowledge and enthusiasm, and much of what you talk about is above my head from an intellectual standpoint.
With the branding, we are kind of working with trying to create the perfect storm to bring all of these pieces together.
Right.
So we're working on as much as we can until we get the brand and the graphics design. There will become a point when we will need that piece before we can advance on the website side, but we are going to bring that perfect storm together before 2020.
Before 2020. Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for coming.
Of course.
Okay, next up, we have Infrastructure and Asset Management, and Kevin Grant and Kyle Billifer.
Good afternoon. Hopefully, this will be information that we can get on that webpage soon, once that redesign is out. But briefly wanted to talk this afternoon about the franchise solid waste collection and disposal agreement that we have with Republic Services. It currently expires December 31st of this year, so we're getting ready to put out an RFP for competitive bidding for our new contract. The current franchise agreement concerns the collection and disposal of residential trash and recycling from the unincorporated residents of Cabarrus County. It also provides for the disposal and set rate for residential trash for the residents of Kannapolis, Mount Pleasant, Harrisburg, Midland, and Two? I got them, okay. So that's kind of a unique portion. The contract also gives us the ability to collect residential trash at our construction and demolition landfill and transport it to the Speedway landfill for 0 tipping fees. History on it, this original agreement was signed back in 2007. We renewed it in 2012 with an amendment that gave us reduced rates for the residents. And it also gave us the expanded curbside recycling, in which we went from 18-gallon bins for recycling to 96-gallon carts that we currently exercise at this point. So going forward, right now, like I said, we're working on the RFP. We'd like to get that released out in mid-May and start receiving competitive bids during that time period. Hope to have everything where we get a selection sometime in mid-June. We'd like to present our recommendations at the August Board of Commissioners meeting with a second reading in September, so that by that point, we're ready to go come January 1st of 2018.
That schedule is an aggressive schedule that allows us to obviously have the 2 public hearings, but also give the contractor that is chosen enough time to do all their route match, as that's one of the most important parts of this. The proposal is one portion of it, but then them getting down their route match and how they're going to meet all that based on our requirements is a big portion of this. And I only think maybe Commissioner Poole was here the last time we went through it, but that was exercising our second extension of it. And at that point, we decided that we would go ahead and bid it out the next time. But the contract will most likely be structured the same to have the option for those 2 5-year extensions. And a draft of that's already been sent to the county manager's office and Rich to review. It just went out today, though, in their defense. It's quite long, so we've been working on it. We've looked at a lot of other counties and municipalities also.
Okay, additional questions? I'm sure we will have opportunity to talk about this a number of additional times.
You will. One of the portions of the actual RFP is going to explain exactly what the services are that are provided right now, because we're a little bit different than some other or counties in what we have, specifically because of the construction and demolition landfill and what Republic provides to us up there and to our citizens. That's a little bit unique. So we've gone into detail in the first section of the RFP saying, this is what we get right now. We would like to see proposals on all of this. If you can't provide that, provide the rest of these costs. So we'll have to evaluate that with the board, because those are some interesting services that are provided.
Yeah, most franchise agreements that go out just consider just the collection and disposal of residential trash. Ours has a few more items to it that makes it just a little more complicated when you put it out to bid.
Okay, any questions? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is discussion related to former county home property. Jonathan.
So this is a piece of property, or part of a piece of property, that many of you are probably familiar with. And Megan, if you'll advance the next slide, we'll show it. The subject property is outlined in the upper left is the Cooperative Extension Building, and Cabarrus Avenue is running along the upper part of this map. It's also bounded by Warren Coleman Boulevard, or US 601, and then on the side, what would be your right as you're looking at it, is Brown Street, and then finally at the lower part where it's bounded is Galen Court, which you may not be as familiar with. But this is a piece of property the county has owned. It's referred to as the county home property. There actually was an old county home located where the Walgreens is that was for a long time where people would go as they aged and had no other place to live. It became our Department of Social Services at some point, and we had a number of other services there. This particular piece of the land has never been used. There is a sewer line that runs through it, as well as some power lines, but the topography is so difficult, we've never had a use for it. Habitat for Humanity felt like they could use it. Further on in the packet, there is a survey, and you can see there are some right-of-ways from old subdivisions dating back to the 20s, 30s, and 40s that are just on paper. And Habitat felt like they could build some of those roads and build a different style for them, but the topography proved too challenging. So the board had agreed to donate this property to Habitat. We actually transferred the property. They've returned it to us. At this point, we've been approached by the city of Concord about the use of this for some recreational uses. In particular, what they're interested in doing is possibly some mountain biking on it. They've had some folks who, as a matter of fact, the same contractor who worked with us at Rob Wallace Park to build our mountain bike trail has been on the property, along with some folks from the Tar Heel Trailblazers who build trails all over the region, and feel like that they may be able to get as much as 4 to 5 miles of trails throughout this property. In addition, as you drive Cabarrus Avenue, you've probably seen when they redid Cabarrus Avenue years ago, they left a bike lane that takes you down to the traffic circle in the bottom of the hill. And we own some additional property that's all floodplain at the bottom of the hill off of Transport Place. And this would allow a mountain biking off-road course, but then there'd be a connection on roads to get back down to Irish Buffalo Creek and what is planned for some future greenways on Irish Buffalo and the redevelopment of the whole Brown Mill and Gibson Mill areas. So it ties in with a lot of different things the city is doing. At this point, we're not really asking for any action. We're not bringing this to you to say transfer this to the city. We just wanted to make you aware of it, make sure you're comfortable with that, and we would go forward with the city and get into some more detailed discussions. I mean, one option they've given us is we would continue to own the property and be part of a 3-party agreement. The other option is the board, you may want to consider just transferring the property, and they would have a 2-party agreement on the development and maintenance of the trail, and they would be the property owners. I'll point out there is a piece of property in the middle where the commissioners years ago had transferred a parcel to the city for some public housing. That's still active public housing that's on there, and that would remain where it is. And we've also retained an area. We've talked about the area directly adjacent to the Cooperative Extension building as being a possibility for us to construct another building in the future should we need to for some of our offices, and we would retain that. There is some area there that the topography would allow some construction. But the rest of the topography, if we had overlaid this on it, you wouldn't be able to see the trees. The topographic lines are so close together.
Okay, questions for Jonathan? I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to talk about this more later.
Yeah. One thing about that particular proposed use is that if for some reason, whether it's the county or the city at a future time, there's something that is a more advantageous development, it would be very easily transitioned from a mountain bike trail and created into a nice development site as well. So.
That's right. We have talked to them about it. Even if you chose to transfer it, that we would have some kind of a clawback in there that should there be another use, or should it not be used for that purpose, that it could come back to the county. Or again, we could retain ownership of it.
Right.
And the same would be true with the Transport Place. Transport Place property is all within the 100-year floodplain, and a lot of it's within the floodway. So there really isn't a building use for that. It's just some open space the county acquired many years ago.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next up is active living in parks. Discussion about park operation hours, and we have Londa and Byron here.
I think you all know what a wonderful winter, or seemed like winter, that we had, how beautiful it was. And I think that's what got this started again. It's nothing new. We hear it every year in the summertime. It's 104 degrees in the evening, so they want to come in, customers want to come in early to walk. And then in the winter, when we close at 5, and it's 80 degrees, and the sun's still out, then we have people coming. So that's why we wanted to bring this information to you, and it's going on. It's nothing new. It's happened. We probably had more people this year.
Yes.
Simply because of the weather and how wonderful it was. But, we have there's no lights on the trails. There's no lights at some of the parks. Rob Wallace Park has one light. That's on the building.
Yes, ma'am.
The other do have lights in the parking lot, but not in the rest of the park. So if you're open in the winter after 5, which our hours are November 1st through the end of February, close at 5 because it's dark. and we don't have lights. So we've talked about it for years. We talked about it with our park commission last month or month before, whichever it was, and Commissioner Shue was at that meeting, and we thought, Byron, I want to get Byron to give you some of the numbers. This is what this is talking about here is just not recommending, is just talking about 1 hour earlier in the morning. And it's amazing what it would cost to actually do that. Nothing extended in the evening, just in morning hours.
Sure. As Londa mentioned, after discussion with the logistics, the cost, the staffing of opening the parks 1 hour earlier, you are looking at approximately $26,227 for our part-time staff to have those facilities open an hour earlier, to have those there. That also includes, that does not include, if this were to be approved May 16th, $4,000 to have the parks change and open an hour earlier from May 16th to the end of the fiscal year. So $30,000 to just open the parks just to open the parks 1 hour earlier. That does not include change of signage or update of websites, which I know that's not going to be in our hands, but the paper forms and anything like that, the brochures that we would hand out.
We were quite surprised, and that is based on, to have it open in an hour, whether it's in the morning or in the evening, doesn't matter. It's still an hour and a half is what we base the schedule on, because the rangers have to have all the bathrooms open, make sure everything's safe, either in the morning or in the evening. Then they're closing up after everyone leaves. So hour and a half is what that's based on. We were quite surprised when we figured up just those few hours and what we had.
Just because we say the parks close at 8 o'clock does not mean the rangers are leaving at 8 o'clock. They have a lot to clean up to make sure they are presentable for the next following morning.
Well, especially when it's warm. Just trying to find the people to get them out of the park was the hard part this year. Commissioner Shue may have something to add from that conversation. We had a lengthy conversation that night.
Yes, we did, and, it seemed like an awful lot of money, and I don't know how many patrons expressed their wishes to have it open another hour, but I was looking at this, and I just sort of just caught my eye just now, looking at the paragraph there where it says, the second paragraph from the bottom. If we just open 1 hour earlier and closing 2 hours later than what we are now, it's $52,000. But now, in the next paragraph, we're going to only be opening an hour earlier and leave the closing time the same, but yet it's just half. Whereas you had 3 hours before at 52, and now you've got 1 hour at 26. Now, I didn't quite understand that.
The 3 hour portion gave that coverage of the additional time, whether they're opening earlier or having to close later than the scheduled time frame. Just opening the 1 hour earlier, we have that in there as the 1.5 hour to make sure that we have that time to get these parks clean and presentable for the following day.
Yeah. I think I missed the 0.5 part, Byron.
Sure.
That's where it was, because it's actually just half. If those 3 hours, you're looking at 1.5, it would
Correct.
be half the fee. I understand that. But we surely do want to accommodate all of our park patrons as much as we can. And I'd be anxious to hear what some of my other fellow commissioners would think about adding an additional $26,000, $30,000 to our reoccurring budget. So.
I was comparing you had put the city of Concord hours. They operate a little longer than we do?
Yes.
Both winter and summer?
Yes. Kannapolis is similar, and most everyone is a little bit different, may open earlier, may close later, may close earlier than us, but everybody around is similar in hours.
Mm-hmm.
Some have rangers, some don't. Like most of the city parks do not have a ranger or an attendant that's at that facility.
So there's no really additional cost to them to
Correct.
stay open later or open earlier. I did get email, I think one email, perhaps two, and I think your description was very appropriate because we experienced unseasonably warm weather earlier than normal. That caught a lot of people's attention. And of course, I've heard you mention the attendance, particularly at our newest Wallace Park, was significantly higher than you may have anticipated because of that weather situation. So, yeah, it may be the opposite next year. We don't know. Commissioner Kiger.
Well, I guess with anything, if there's going to be an expenditure, then what I'd want to know is how do we quantify the demand? If the demand's there, then, the board has an obligation to really look as hard as we can and see if we can afford it. If the demand's not there, the needs are astronomical as we look across the board in every category. So, that's really what it boils down to. And so, yeah, February when it's 75, yeah, it's tough not to be in a park. So, but anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
I'm sorry.
Go right ahead.
I can add also that our park ranger out at Frank List said that when he opens up at 8 o'clock in the morning out there, a lot of times, a lot of people are still, they're waiting across the street because they're limited parking to get into Frank List, and they park across the street and on the street and all kind of stuff, waiting to get in. So, I don't know how the other parks are as far as, waiting to get in like that, but.
Vietnam Veterans Park is the same way. 8:01, if that gate's not open, usually county managers get the phone call. But there's a group that come to most of the facilities. Camp Spencer, I don't think they're there at 8 o'clock. And Rob Wallace, you can speak to that maybe now. I'm not sure.
Right now, they are coming in at 8 o'clock, but we do not have a waiting line as Frank List or Vietnam Veteran has before 8 o'clock.
I think one of the reasons we put this for discussion rather than action is that to give you some time to get some feedback and to think about it. And I know closing time is we're talking more about opening, but closing was the other issue. Yeah, it was beautiful when we first opened Rob Wallace Park, and I watched Byron one afternoon, and I got to say, closing a park is an art I didn't realize was. He practices very well. You kind of start shuffling people and warning them a little bit. Actually, he has a volunteer there who helps them clear the playground as it ends up. But it was interesting. I think that it was a little loose that day. There was a fire truck they all wanted to look at. But that said,
supply and demand.
It was getting dark that day. So what was happening was they were going towards the only lit area in Rob Wallace Park, and so they were able to stay there. But had they wanted to stay on the playground, we don't have lights. So the other reason it's up for discussion is we would want to look at each one of our facilities and maybe just not add a lot of lights, but we would probably want to add some strategic lights in some areas if we do this. So I think it's more of a June or a July 1st type issue if you do choose to make a change rather than doing it before this budget year ends.
And on the other hand, you look at right now, it's 5:45. It's been raining for close to 15 minutes or whatever. Pretty hard rain, it sounds like. Frank List Park, all of the parks are open until 8 o'clock, or Frank List Park until 9 today. There's not going to be anybody there, but we still have to have a ranger there because the park is open. So even though there's nothing hopefully there's no people there. There's people there. Our staff is there. So, we're dealing with the weather, you never know what it's going to be, and what people want to know, why aren't you open? It's 70 degrees. So, well, our hours are this, and that's what we base our budget on, and that's what the citizens don't seem to quite understand. They think we should be open when they want to be there. And that would be nice, but we don't operate.
This was brought for discussion for now. I think as the summary says, we receive about 20 comments a year. I'm sure you may hear some as well. Maybe there's a way to quantify this. And maybe there's a way we can reach out and get some more feedback prior to taking that next step, if it's okay with you guys. I think we can reach out and maybe even start surveying park visitors.
And does it have to be across the board? If the demand is there, the anecdotal evidence of people standing across the street at 8 o'clock in the morning says, okay, well, it sounds like some demand, but if there's a park that's not the case, but is it, I mean, I'm sure it's probably somewhat of a hassle, but do they all sort of have to follow the same schedule?
It makes it much easier for us to publicize the opening and closing dates. And if you went to Camp Spencer Park at 7 o'clock and walked, or wanted to walk and it was closed, but you knew you could do it at Frank Lisk, then we get that phone call.
Yeah, there's a lot of mornings that there's people standing in this lobby waiting for those red lights to turn green on the door so they can go in and pay their taxes and and whatever other, get building permits and whatever. So I don't know if it's okay with the board, maybe we can look at some options on how to get some additional feedback.
I think that's probably a good thing to do, and just like I had mentioned a little while ago, we don't really know, and so until we have some kind of an idea as to how big the demand is, I think we'd be jumping the gun a little bit, and the money that we're talking about using for this could possibly maybe be used for lights or something like that in some of those areas where that, we don't have lights. But, the report that Ernie gives the senior citizen, the active living for the use at the senior centers and all, maybe a report like that can be somehow worked out. The number of patrons visiting, the number of patrons talked to, and the number of patrons that would like to see it open an hour, and get you some kind of numbers like that. That's just my little 2 cents worth.
I can say that at Frank Lisk Park, during summer camp, which starts the week after school is out and ends the week, so it's 9 weeks this year before school starts, Frank Lisk Park is open at 7 a.m. because we have it open early for parents to be able to drop their children off. So there are people that you have that opportunity for those 9 weeks that you could walk at 7 a.m.
Okay, any additional questions? Thank you very much. Okay, we move on to discussion items for action at our May 15th meeting. And first up is funding request for new Performance Learning Center construction and site purchase. We're happy to have Kelly Klutz and Tim Louder with us.
Thank you. Get on with it pretty quick. Our next meeting starts at 6 o'clock, so we'll get at it. We here today basically just asking you to move forward. We have a $4.24 million budget you've already agreed to, I guess, for the PLC. We have the opportunity right now to purchase a piece of property from NCDOT, which was the original location for the PLC before we look at other alternate locations. But they are currently working toward getting NCDOT to agree to sell it. We are going to actually have the property transferred when purchased to Cabarrus County directly versus doing it to Cabarrus County Schools and then doing a agreement which you have on the agenda. I think for the next couple items is an agency agreement. So this is just basically allowing us to have the funds available to us now to purchase that property and then do some testing and that sort of thing, surveying and that sort of thing, to be able to move forward with the PLC design build concept.
Great, and I think you included maps with the material as to where that property is located. I think everyone's familiar with that. Any questions? Okay, thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Active Living in Parks, Youth Athletic Co-Sponsorship Agreement. And Londa and Byron should have just stayed at the table.
As some of you all know, we sponsor the volunteer youth athletic associations across the county, and that's for your traditional sports, baseball, softball, soccer, and basketball during the traditional time, or what used to be traditional, spring baseball, softball, fall soccer. But now we have so many associations wanting to utilize the facilities for fall baseball and softball and spring soccer. We don't have any requests for basketball, just those that seem to come up from time to time. Commissioner Kiger used to be on the, was a liaison from the Board of Education to the Park Commission, and he's heard some of these issues. He knows. Commissioner Shue has been there for several of them. I believe Byron got to meet with some of the volunteer presidents and Perry Gabriel, who's in charge of the youth athletics, to go over this. And actually, our program committee met with the associations on several occasions. What has brought this to light is that last August, when our department started scheduling the co-sponsored school facilities and taking the money, then the associations that were playing soccer in the spring, and baseball and softball in the fall, that weren't paying the schools were now having to pay us. And so that's what brought all of this about. They were upset with the money, and I'm sure I know some of you all have had some emails because I've been copied on them. That's where this comes about. So our program committee met with the association presidents. They've had, I'm not really sure how many meetings. I think Byron got his new job in the middle of part of this and has been involved with some of it. The Park Commission unanimously recommended that we sponsor spring spring soccer and fall baseball and softball, so that the associations did not have to pay the fees. We don't really know what the estimated loss would be, because this was the first year that we have done this. As you can see, we had taken in $2,050 to this point, but this was the first year. So that's where we are. It's going to be a lot of wear and tear on the fields, and we talked about this in great detail with the wear and the tear on the fields, being able to say, okay, you can't use that field anymore for the rest of this year because it's worn out. We need to do repair, and it's closed for the rest of this season. They all agreed to it at the meetings and thought that was a wonderful thing. That's the only positive thing that I can find in there, is that that will be part of the agreement if this is passed, is that they will, whenever we close the field, it's closed. And I believe Commissioner Shue was at that last meeting where this was being voted on, and that was the association presidents all were in total agreement with this. Byron I don't know if you have anything additional to add to that, since you were at some of those meetings.
I think you covered it very well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Shalonda, on the loss of revenue.
Yeah.
And the increase in maintenance, you got any? I see the loss of revenue. What's the increase of maintenance?
To be determined. It could
Right.
be, because right now we pay the $75,000 to the schools to take care of all of the fields, all of the facilities that we utilize, and it's not necessarily just turf. You could spend on those 6 facilities, easily spend $100,000 on turf, easily, just to keep them in decent shape, which obviously we don't have that kind of money to spend on those.
What additional staff will you need? I mean, you already work during that time. What else?
Yeah.
What are you going to have to do?
That staff time, not much, because it would just be a schedule. And they do that with the associations and Perry together anyway, so. You're not talking about the time, the condition of the field would be the biggest issue.
And that there goes to prove that the growth in Cabarrus County, the way that it is, obviously there's going to be a lot more diverse use of those fields. And it's going to be a burden on the fields, but that's the price, another price of growth. Because the more kids, the more athletic programs, and obviously the greater demand on the fields. And so, I guess it'll be this board's choice, or decision to allow this, but the Active Living and Parks Commission has voted unanimously to go with it. And, but I personally, I think it's going to put a strain on the upkeep and the maintenance of the fields. It's going to be a lot more there, and the loss of the revenue is like, the county manager said, that's not really a significant amount, but I think that the maintenance to is going to be significant, I think.
And of course, we do, and I'm sure Londa could give you more detailed information, but we do have people, these leagues playing spring soccer and then playing the fall baseball, softball, and they were renting the fields. But I suspect as we do this co-sponsorship, we'll see an increase in the numbers using that.
Because there
So
were
that's
a
gonna be
couple
our
of
biggest difference.
A couple of associations that did not, simply because of the fee.
Well, I guess that's what my question is when we look forward and we see that, are we anticipating we're going to squeeze out some other folks' sports? And the only one I can kind of think of off the top of my head is maybe lacrosse. It's catching more and more all the time, and I'm sure they're having a hard time finding fields, and I don't know when lacrosse season is, but there are other sports that play in the spring or fall that would want to be on a field. Now all of a sudden the competition's going to be a lot greater. But
Lacrosse.
Is that the one?
That's the only one.
Okay, well,
And that's currently, not
Yeah.
a co-sponsored
right.
sport of ours.
Right.
Okay, any additional questions?
Another comment, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, but
Yes,
as
sir.
I was going through, and I did have flashbacks of sitting through a lot of meetings on the co-sponsorship agreement several years ago, and just as a point of, I guess, a notation is, we specifically say in here that our co-sponsored groups will not use fields on Sundays, and I really hope that we don't ever get to the point where that's not the case, because to me, the general public being able to just take a walk out on a field, I don't know if anybody's having a picnic, that may be sort of Pollyanna, but, just that it's not so crammed in day after day, all the way from dawn to dusk, where nobody else can ever get on a field. So, that's in there, and this may not have been the time to bring it up, but I just hope that doesn't ever come out. I would hate to see that. So, with that, Mr. Chairman, I will yield the floor.
And there's another comment, that I'd like to make also is, if we do this, that you guys will inspect these fields very regularly, and in the event that, like you said, I think you did, Byron, that if the fields are looking pretty puny, that you can shut them down, except for school use, until they revive or get back where they're usable again. And of course, then that's an inconvenience to the everyday average patron when you do that because of overuse. But then again, it's growth. We got a lot of kids playing in these fields.
That's right.
Well, it's multiple seasons. It's baseball in the spring, and then they want to play it in the fall, or soccer both seasons. So it's just a matter of how often or how big of a Parks and Rec program do you want. Many years ago, we went in the other direction, so this is expanding it back, and ultimately, it's going to cost. It's going to cost more. So, were you actually asking for a decision tonight? I thought this was going to be for discussion there, so.
Well, the Park Commission unanimously recommended to bring this here for us to sponsor them, the non-traditional sports.
So but the next league that you
We'll
would
start
actually
with August.
co-sponsor would be in August.
August.
So I don't know that there needs to be a decision at the
Yeah,
May meeting.
that is correct.
If it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that we hold off a month and let us do some work on this and bring it back to you, because this has potential to get a little bigger than we think, so.
And we got to get our budget talks and all that stuff, which is coming up, and so it's going to just, all that's got to be taken into consideration.
Right.
I think as it stands, it's currently on our agenda for the May 15th meeting, so we can move that to June. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I would say at least June.
Yeah, at least June or July.
That's what I was just asking Ms. Strong, is registrations start at the beginning of August, so I think the June timeframe may be best, but I think July is even possible.
They agreed that it was okay, they understood, to shut down the parks if they got in. I don't think they're going to remember that.
I know.
When you show up to shut down the park, How likely do you think it is that,
It would be in the agreement that they sign,
right?
if in fact that's what happens.
Yeah, I don't think it would be in the email that I received when you shut them down. So I think that, I don't know how you emphasize that. How likely do you think it is that would happen?
Well,
That you would have to do that?
currently, there are several associations that do play the non-traditional seasons.
Right.
The fields are not torn up completely. There's fewer teams in those, the spring soccer and the fall baseball. Quite a few in there, and no softball currently. But the fields get more use, but, you know, this could just open up the door for a lot more use.
Right.
I mean, and the county's growing, so you'll have more use, period.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
I'm having flashbacks to soccer conversations on shutting down certain fields to get them back in operation and other fields. And, I mean, there has to be a schedule to show, all of these fields are going to be shut down at some point in time, and grass grows at certain points in time. So I think if it's going to be expanded to the amount that I think is probably going to open a floodgate, there needs to be a schedule that there's certain times that certain fields will not be used and when the
Correct.
other ones, because otherwise, it's going to be even a bigger problem. So I wouldn't think that we could expand without, I mean, obviously, there's always the cost factor, but having some idea of which fields are available and when fields would be shut down. You're going to have to shut down fields because they're going to get torn up. And I just remember the soccer field issue was a fiasco, and nobody was very happy during quite a bit of those conversations, and I had quite a few phone calls over it.
Yeah, but the last few years have been pretty good.
Yeah, we worked your way through it and got
Yeah.
everybody so that everybody understood what was going on. But
And the
just
fields
to-
the turf was in much better shape, and the players and coaches appreciated that and realized oh, wow, we were out here too much.
Yeah, but if this isn't done with that in mind on the front end, then it's going to be the same type situation. And
Perry went over a schedule
It'll be
with them as to when, not starting before and finishing by for spring and fall already, and they, of course, say they can live within that.
And I think that'd be information we can provide to you. There are dormant periods where we allow for those fields to be fallow and to regenerate, and so we can catalog that for you and show you when there aren't leagues playing on them. Now, that said, it doesn't completely keep people off of them. There's a new sport, cricket, I think, is the latest we found, that just kind of invites themselves out. And didn't know we had cricket in Cabarrus County, but we did.
Okay. Any additional questions? Thank you very much. We will be talking about this quite a bit more, I think. Okay, next up is 4.4, County Manager Amendment to Chapter 50 of the Cabarrus County Code of Ordinances, and Jonathan and Londa on that one.
I think Londa's allergies may let her get through this one.
I think so, yeah. The last few weeks have been tough.
We've been making changes to different parts of the Code of Ordinances. Chapter 50 is actually titled Parks. That was a change from Parks and Recreation. This is a change to active living in parks. And the changes really just reflect the name change, as well as the fact that also includes senior centers. But I'll let
Correct.
Londa go through in detail if there's anything else in there for you to look for. But it would be actually, because it's in your Code of Ordinances, it will require this public hearing and an ordinance that you adopt to make changes.
The Senior Centers Department of Aging did not have an ordinance prior to our merger, so that's why we had merged them together. So the senior centers, as Jonathan mentioned, are included in it along with the parks, and it's pretty much the same other than adding in the senior centers, and the name changes everywhere.
But that said, I'm sure you don't stay up at night reading our Code of Ordinances, so as you go through, it's not just the changes where we change those names, but look at the language within the code itself. If you could, and tell us if there's anything in particular you have a question about or anything else you may want to change while we're looking at this particular chapter. And that way you can be familiar with what else is in there.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay, moving to the next item. Finance, 4.5, agency agreement for the new Performance Learning Center, followed by agency agreement for the new high school.
Mr. Chairman, can I back up just before she
Yes,
gets
sir.
started here? Going back to this one here that London was at.
The
they're-
ordinance?
Yeah, they're
Mhm.
requesting a motion to set the public hearing for the regular meeting on May 15th. Do we need to suspend our rules and vote for that, or what we
We have
gonna do?
got several other public hearings
Okay.
to schedule, and so
We'll
if
just
it
incorporate
pleases the
together.
board, we'll do that at the end.
Okay,
And cover them all in one motion.
Good, thank you.
Great, thank you.
I'll go ahead and combine the two different discussion topics for both the agency agreements for the Performance Learning Center and the new high school. This is just part of our process that we go through, and an agency agreement will allow our board to have the school board act on our behalf, and as far as going into construction contracts and equipping the buildings. We are not, as Cabarrus County, we would not be going out for bid for those things. We will approve the construction bids once they get those bids back in hand. But as far as going out and getting second bids on equipment and furnishings and stuff like that, they will be acting as our agent on behalf. We'll pay the bills, but they'll act on our behalf for this project for both the Performance Learning Center and the new high school. The agency agreements are being drawn up by our county attorney, so we'll have those available in your packet for the May 15th meeting, all the terminology.
And this is standard procedure that we've
Yes.
done on all of the other school projects as
I
well.
pulled out the most recent one we had on Royal Oak, so I've got that if you had any questions, but it's basically in a nutshell, that's what would happen.
Right.
Any questions on agency agreement?
Okay, well, I think you're up next on update of capital project fund budgets and related project ordinances.
At the end of the month, you'll be going through your regular budget process, your budget meetings, and that's for our general fund and our other annually adopted funds. But the capital project funds are multi-years. And so if we begin the multi-year project with a certain budget, it stays that same budget amount until the life of the project is over. But from time to time, we get more interest earnings, or we might need to update the way we account for different projects. So once a year, we'll go through all of our multi-year funds and present to you, usually in the May and June meetings, before we can get all of them to you. It's an update. So this is a budget amendment and project ordinance that relate to the budget amendments for three of our funds, actually four of them. Fund 343, which are Construction Renovation Fund, and that's the fund that we have county projects that are cash funded. For example, we're doing, the bathrooms at Camp Spencer, Probst Hall. That will be located in that fund. The second one is the Limited Obligation Bond, Fund 369, and that's where we have our debt proceeds will be placed there when we have our debt in the fall for our new high school, Performance Learning Center, the warehouse, and the parking deck. In the meantime, we have transferred money over to that fund for cash for engineering, architect, some of the upfront costs. So that's what that fund is. The Small Project Fund is also a county fund where we have money we'll get in for Board of Elections, and we have to spend it specifically on that. We'll have our deferred tax collections that we put there that we can use on our soil and water projects or other projects that the board would deem necessary. And the last one is our Fund 450, which is our capital reserve. That's where our money goes into, remember, based on our fund balance policy, we transfer money over there and we use it for one-time capital projects. So that's just like a holding place. So that needs to be updated also. So all that being said, the county finance staff has looked at these four funds, and we have a budget amendment attached, several budget amendments, and related project ordinances to be able to spend this money in the proper places. And all that was attached with your agenda. Any questions? And we'll come back next month with some more funds to go through.
Okay, any questions for Susan? I think it's very self-explanatory, most of it. So I think you're up next to talk about installment financing contract.
Just like the agency agreements, that was standard procedure, this is the next step for our debt issuance that we're going to do in the fall. So last month I came to you when we told you the amount, the not to exceed the $128 million, $128,105. So the next thing to do is to have a public hearing, and we would like to do that on the May 15th meeting. We had a call for a public hearing during our April board meeting, so this is the next step, is to actually have the board have the public hearing on May 15th. I did want to point out that our bond attorney, Steve Cordell, will not be able to be with us on May 15th, so if you have any questions that I can get to him beforehand concerning this hearing or anything, just let me know and I can get those questions answered. But this again is standard procedure for to get us right on track for our debt issuance in the fall.
Okay. Questions on that? All righty. Thank you very much. 4.9, infrastructure and asset management, transfer of surplus vehicle to Mount Mitchell Fire and Medical, and Michael Miller is with us tonight.
Good evening. Mount Mitchell Fire and Medical has requested one surplus EMS ambulance from Cabarrus County, and we have identified asset number 8246, which is a 2010 Chevrolet Model 4500 ambulance, and it is a match for the request. So the requested action of the board is to declare one EMS ambulance surplus property and authorize disposition in accordance with the county's policy. Any questions?
No questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Library Summer Reading Program Fines and Fees Waiver, and we are delighted to have Emery Ortiz to talk with us.
Hello. So the library system is in high gear for summer reading. We're getting ready to get started in about a month. And before I present the fines and fees waiver idea to you, I wanted to share our summer reading promotional video that one of our branch managers made. And Megan has that for you. This is the world premiere. So Davey Beauchamp, our Harrisburg branch manager, did that all by hand. Stop motion animation is very cool. The theme for summer reading this year is Build a Better World, which is where the Legos come in. And as part of that, we wanted to empower our library patrons, especially the kids, to kind of build their own summer reading program and to take the love of literacy and building literacy into their everyday life into their own hands. So what we're proposing to do this year is they're going to choose their own activities to fill in on their reading logs this year. And then they can also choose the prize that they get for that reading log. And one of the prizes we'd like to be able to offer is a fine waiver for up to $2 in fines, similar as we do to our Food for Fines program every year after Thanksgiving. And that would enable anyone with a fine on their card after they finished a reading log to turn in that waiver and have some of the fines waived off of their account. We do block library card accounts after they reach $5, so that could be, a big potential enabler for them to continue to use their library cards over the summer.
Questions for Emery? Well, the summer reading programs is wonderful, and the participation numbers, I don't remember them off the top of my head, but they're quite large.
6,500, I think, is what we had last year, so
Yeah,
we're edging
yeah.
up on 7,000.
Right, so it's a very popular program. Yes, ma'am.
So do you have any idea of how many people would have fines, the $2 waivers, or a history of that?
Sure. There are a lot of variables, especially during summer reading, that could, kind of play into that. I can tell you for the Food for Fines program last year, which is only, I think it's 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, we only waived about $1,200 And if you're not familiar with that program, people turn in canned food items, non-perishable food items for a food drive, and then get up to $2 waived off their account for that. So in summer reading, first of all, they'd have to finish a reading log. And then they'd have to choose that. That'd have to be something that they want. We're also offering books and kind of educational, mind-building activity books and things like that as a prize as well.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for coming, and I extend our compliments to Davey on the
Thank you.
video.
Yes.
If that's as popular as Lego Batman was at the movie theater, we'll be in business.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, Planning and Development, Moorhead West Area Plan, and we're happy to have Susie Morris with us.
There's some food back there.
Okay, so hopefully we are ready to go. I did. Okay, we'll try it. I'm pleased to present to you this evening the Moorhead West Area Plan. This is a summary of the plan itself. The plan is roughly about 100 pages. We partnered back in February of last year with the town to take a look at the area of Harrisburg, where some of you may be familiar with. If you remember the EPIC project, it was also called the Preserve at Grayson. So we'll just kind of walk you through the presentation. It'll walk you through the different areas, what the expected uses are. And if you have any questions as we're going along, please feel free to ask. So the team of consultants, we actually got underway in April, and Nealon Design, Nealon Planning is the group that the town actually contracted with. So we partnered, we provided some funding for the plan to the town, but the town actually entered into the contract. VHB was the transportation component of the project, which you'll see a little later on. And the Knoll Consulting Group, for those of you who are familiar with the Wasatch study, Knoll Consulting Group was actually involved in that study, as was Land Design. Jake Petrosky and Dale Stewart both were heavily involved in that process and are currently updating that plan. Meg Nealon was part of our central area plan as well as the Harrisburg area plan, so they all are very familiar with what's happening in Cabarrus County. The process started in April, and we wrapped up this past February. There were some delays along the way, just trying to figure out where certain things happen or how they happen, so we kind of worked on that. This is the study area, so you can see the Harrisburg, oops, sorry. The area where the plan is where it says Harrisburg. So the area where you see the yellow, that's the project area. To the right, the preserve at Grayson, the area on that is colored, that is the project that was proposed at the county line. It came in 2004. There was about 1,600 acres in that project, and everything in that project was rezoned to PUD. So that is a planned unit development type project. It was scheduled to have a golf course. It was going to have 1.4 square million feet of retail, which is actually more than Concord Mills has. And it also was scheduled to have about 1,600 residential units. Had this project happened, it really would have changed the face of Harrisburg, because at that point, I think they had a population of roughly 6,000 people.
Did the golf course get graded and then it got left?
Yes, some of it got graded. Yes. So if you flew over it while that was happening, you could see, and now in the aerials, you can see some of the features are there. Most of this area is controlled by the town of Harrisburg. It's either in the town limits or in their ETJ area. The purple circles that you see are the properties that are actually still under Cabarrus County control. We have some light industrial and then a GC piece at the corner, if you're familiar with where the electrical union building was. So the project study area goes a little bit across 29 and then down to 49 into Caldwell Business Park. So the objectives of this plan were to determine the highest and best use, to develop a 20-year vision for future development, and also to make recommendations regarding future development, infrastructure, and development regulations and policies. So that project that was in place, that zoning, since that project didn't happen, all of those properties are tied up in that PUD zoning designation. Over the years, people have approached town council about asking for them to take the PUD away and put it back to what it was, which their ordinance allows, but the board really just didn't feel like they wanted to do that until they had some kind of a plan in place. So not only is this plan a land use plan, but it is also an economic development plan for the town to use and also for the EDC to use to market the property. So looking at the project, there were a lot of, there are some challenges for this particular piece of property. Regional access to 85 is not as good as it is in Charlotte and Concord. There are impacts from the speedway and the landfill. Residential doesn't really want to be there, doesn't make sense. When you look at the town of Harrisburg, they don't have a lot of different types of diversity in housing. Most of it is large lot single family. It's not really walkable because you have 29 as your, as the center of town. In this particular area, there are a lot of environmental constraints. There's a lot of topo, also a lot of floodplain. And then there's also a lack of utilities and road access. So if you drive down Hudspeth Road or you drive down Moorhead, people are always kind of saying, but you have all this property over here. Why hasn't anybody looked at this? The reason they haven't looked at it is because if you go back in there and you walk that property, there is significant grade. When the first project came through, I think that they were proposing to put in sewer lines 20 feet in the ground, which those of you who know about Wausau, that doesn't work. So there's just a lot of challenges in this particular area that really have kept it from being developed over the years. As far as strengths, it does have access to 49 and 29. It's also very close to I-485. That same housing is a strength for Harrisburg because it's high-quality housing. There are good schools and there's low crime. Proximity to major destinations, so the Speedway, Concord Mills, UNC Charlotte. And then there's also a lot of natural areas in this particular area, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So as far as the public engagement process, when we started, there was a survey that was placed online. There were 176 respondents. For those of you that have been around a while, you know that is an awesome response to a survey. Harrisburg seems to get a lot of response through online surveys. There were 2 public meetings held at Town Hall, and then as the kickoff started, there were stakeholder interviews. Those were one day. There were 6 interest group meetings, and we had 46 people attend that. So there has been a lot of public input during the process, and people, they were pretty clear about what they wanted, which you'll see in the next slide. So currently underutilized, every single question, every area that they were asked about, people wanted restaurants. We want restaurants. You can't buy a pair of shoes in Harrisburg. There's nowhere to shop. We need more parks. We need greenways. So they got a lot of good feedback through the public meetings and then also through the surveys. So number 1 that came out on the survey to make the area more attractive was quality development. Number 2 was green space. And number 3 was more trees. And then 4 was well-placed lighting, and the other was just kind of random things, and then better signs or sign controls. So you'll see that what the public actually wanted are some things that came out in this study that will be carried forward. So again, initially, the thought was, how do we attract investment? And, with the position of this property, it's going to be very difficult. So we decided that we needed to look at targeting key properties and to leverage what was there. So the yellow area that you see in that particular area, you know, the use there that kind of started to show was residential, and then especially some smaller units. Harrisburg is seeing a lot of interest in 55 and over. People don't want to have to maintain a yard. Also, millennial interest, where people want walkable, smaller lots, you know, not the acre that historically has been there. The next potential was to focus on recruiting local serving retail and office, especially along 49. I apologize that my pointer isn't working correctly. So below that red is where the new Harris Teeter shopping center is. The next one was to target key properties and infrastructure for industrial. So to the north, you have the property that's located near the Speedway, and then to the south, you have Caldwell Business Park. Encourage family-oriented entertainment and recreation. There are several places where this can happen, and then also to leverage open space and amenities. So as we go through, you'll see that those themes are carried through the plan. So as far as potential land use, the areas kind of lended themselves to certain uses. So what you see coming across the top fourth of your screen, that is Mallard Creek. So there are some natural divisions with this study area. So that was one division that was used, and that created Area A, which is motorsports related, which turned into what we are calling Motorsports Plus. Area B lends itself to residential. For those of you who are familiar with the EPIC project or with Founders Reserve, when you get out towards the county line, there was a subdivision that was called El Dorado Hills. A developer has since finished that out. So the section north of where it says Area D, that arrow in the yellow, that is being built out, and that project will probably finish up within the next 18 months or so. Area C is an area where we already have some folks in that area that are interested in conservation, and they are doing some things on their own. So Area C seemed to make sense as a conservation area. Area D, again, across the street from the Harris Teeter, seems to make sense as a mixed-use and commercial gateway. And then Area F is recreation and open space. That is the borrow pit at the Speedway. If you've driven down Moorhead and you saw where they were pushing dirt, or where the big, where the lake was, that is no more, the pond was there, and now there is no pond. And then Area E is industrial, and again, just capturing what's already on the ground. That's close to 600 racing, and then coming down to Caldwell. So taking that one step further, we started looking at land use and what makes sense here. So we'll go through each one of those areas, but you can see overall for the study area, it really followed those natural patterns. So north of Mallard Creek is its own area, you know, south of 49, mostly industrial. At 49 and where the Caldwell extension is scheduled to be, you know, makes sense for that to be a commercial node and to develop with some more intensity. So Area A, the Motorsports Plus, some of the expected uses that we think will happen here would be hospitality and office, entertainment, recreation, and then light industrial flex space, and then some manufacturing. So again, these are things that could be located near the Speedway where people really don't mind noise, not really residential. And again, creating that boundary with Mallard Creek. So again, here are some examples: office, flex space, and then entertainment, recreation, and hospitality. So these are two projects that you may or may not be familiar with. The first one is One Daytona. If you've ever been to the Daytona Speedway, this project is happening across the street. In the end, they have land use entitlements for 1.4 million square feet of retail, dining, and entertainment, 2,500 movie theater seats, 660 hotel rooms, 1,350 residential units, and then almost another million square feet of commercial and industrial space. So it's a mixed-use project. sponsorships are not what they used to be for racing, and the fan base is not there like it used to be either. People want a total, complete experience package. So One Daytona is trying to bring that there and to provide some additional uses besides just coming to the Speedway. You know, can I go to Charlotte Motor Speedway and can I spend a whole week there and entertain my family, whether it's mom or dad or I'm bringing the kids? And then Indianapolis Motor Speedway, what they are doing is they actually have a redevelopment commission, and they have created a plan that includes lodging, entertainment, retail, and office. So this is happening around the Speedway. There really isn't a residential component, but again, to try to get uses that want to be located near the Speedway, and to have that area back on the tax rolls and also vibrant and somewhere that the community can go, places for new businesses to start. Area A and F both contain active recreation components. This is a picture of the actual borrow pit that's out there. And other places, borrow pits like this have been redeveloped into BMX tracks. And then you have the Whitewater Center. This is a project that happened in Pahrump, Nevada. This is Spring Mountain Motor Resort and Country Club. So it is actually a country club where you go and you can pay to race vehicles, test vehicles. It is a very interesting concept, and it is very popular. It's about an hour and 15 minutes from Vegas, and it sees a lot of traffic. So in Area A, there are some issues that would need to be handled. So some of the recommendations that came out of that, there is a PID that is part of the Harrisburg property, but that PID only allows one use, and that is the use of campground. So one of the recommendations is to modify the PID so that you would be almost seamless whether you were in Concord city limits or in Harrisburg city limits. And again, the county's portion of this is so small, most of this will fall on the town of Harrisburg, because if you want to develop and you need utilities, they're going to require annexation. Plus, the majority of the property is already in their extraterritorial jurisdiction, so they have control anyway. To foster relationships between manufacturing, so again, find those relationships with things that want to be located near the Speedway. Motorsports, engineering, you know, what are our logical businesses that could partner with UNCC and then partner with the Speedway? And again, residential really doesn't need to be in that area so that there's not, you know, there's a lot of activity, a lot of noise. Area B, this is the area that we think most likely will develop as residential. It could be any type, so a mix of uses or single-family residential. That single-family residential, where it's calling that out, that is that reserve project. So it is almost completely built out. But there are some opportunities for mixed use north of that, but you do have to cross the creek. So condos and apartments, again, 55 and older is a market right now for Harrisburg. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of a TOD development. So we used to have transportation-oriented development, which is what you're seeing happening along the rail line in Charlotte, where the rail stops are, the nodes develop, and you get a lot of high density. This is actually a different type of development. It's trail-oriented development. So you all were just talking about Parks and Recreation. Cabarrus County is has parts of the Carolina Thread Trail, and then there is also a trail coming from Charlotte. It was on the news this past weekend, the Cross Charlotte Trail. They opened up another section. That will come to the county line, and it will be a really good opportunity for Harrisburg and the county to partner so that people can come into Cabarrus County then. You could actually make it from Ballantyne the whole way up to Cabarrus County when that project is complete. This is a rendering of what the Greenway could look like. And again, with that trail-oriented development, it's to get eyes on the Greenway so that it's not just some trail out in the middle of nowhere. Eyes on the Greenway, buildings located next to the Greenway, so that, you have more than just the recreational activity. You may have people using it to get to work each day. So within this area, the goals are to support residential development compatible with adjacent development. So on the Charlotte side, the density is about 3 units per acre. If there is a north-south, if the property were to open up, it could have more density with it. And also, there could be a mix of some non-residential uses if that spine road came into play and if there was a commitment to infrastructure. Area C, this area is pretty much designated as residential and then as a very low density plus conservation. The property that has the circle on it, that particular family is very interested in working with the county on a conservation easement. The small parcel to the south, that family owns as well. So ideas for this area would be conservation. That parcel that has the circle on it, the family really wants that property to be put into a conservation easement. They're very interested in teaching people about wildlife. That would make an excellent property to link up as a nature preserve along the Mallard Creek Greenway. This is an example of how conservation development happens. We have this option in our zoning ordinance, and so does Harrisburg. Essentially, the trade-off for smaller lots is that you give more green space. So again, in this area, the goals would be to conserve natural resources, support efforts to create a conservation easement and nature preserve, and then regulations that make conservation design an easy choice. So if I'm a developer and I want, 10 units per acre instead of the 3 that I can get, how do I get there, and does that make sense for me? As an aside, these properties are already participating in some of the programs that North Carolina has available. So where the blue arrow is, we actually have a butterfly highway here in Cabarrus County. And what they do along the butterfly highway is they plant different types of plants so that the pollinators will come and they will take pit stops along these highways to try to, butterflies, bees, and birds to try to, we're having a problem with bees, so create those natural habitats where they can stop along the way and shouldn't be bothered. And then also the wildlife habitat program. Area D, this is the area that seems to lend itself the most to a mixed use type district, which would happen around that intersection. So that red line that you see, that is the proposed Caldwell Road extension that has been on the books for a really long time, but nobody can really figure out how it needs to happen because it's going to be such a big undertaking. But around that area, professional office services, mixed use, high quality multifamily residential. This is the one place in Harrisburg that multifamily residential potentially could be tolerated near the county line. And then institutional and light industrial along with the existing restaurants. So again, the Harris Teeter Shopping Center has already kind of taken off and hopefully will spur some additional development there. And then these are just some examples. This is a rendering that was done of what that area could look like with the higher density, but concentrated around that node. And then again, another rendering for the north side of 49. And the 3D kind of modeling to see what it would look like. Even though you're getting into that density, it doesn't necessarily give you that big city feel. So again, for Area D, encourage a mix of uses, support a mix of housing, and then allow infill development and redevelopment, which they're already seeing, and then approve the appearance for the quality of development and wayfinding. Area E, this area has already developed as industrial, so more than likely it would remain industrial, and there are some lots available for new industrial. So again, the purple is Caldwell Business Park. So encourage industrial infill development. And then one of the recommendations that's coming out of this as well is for Harrisburg to kind of tighten up their I-1 zoning district to only allow uses that would be true industrial uses and to rezone those properties. So as far as open space, A and F have components of open space. A lot of these are going to have to be public-private partnerships, whether it's, the county joining with Harrisburg or, Concord does have some interest in this region, in the area. And then opportunities again for passive recreation with the greenways, with the streams, with Mallard Creek. You have a lot of opportunities for recreation that just kind of happen naturally. There wouldn't have to be a lot done to these areas to put a trail in or to have an extension of the greenways coming from Charlotte. So again, the goals for that area: provide a mix of open space, assist with the public and private partnerships, and then support private investment in entertainment or spectator sports venues that enhance the Speedway area, but that would be tied to recreation. And then one of the recommendations that came out of this was blanket easements when utilities are installed. That's something that we already do and Harrisburg already does. So if there is a sewer line going in, typically, we will get that easement. As far as mobility, the two red lines that you see, that is the Caldwell Road extension with a collector coming off of it. It's kind of unclear at this point. It depends on which road happens first. Nobody has a really true cost for, you can see that either way you go, you have to cross streams. And one you cross two smaller streams, another one you have to go across Mallard Creek, which is very wide. You have floodplain and the stream at that point. So once this plan is adopted, what we were looking to do, so your presentation earlier, they were talking about scoring and how all of that happens. What we would do is we would take this to the MPO and ask them to potentially, can you just take a look at it and score it and see where we're at? Because during the process, what we think would need to happen is that there may be some public investment on, either end, or there could be a private investment on either end to get to certain points. But then there's going to be gaps that would have to be filled, maybe with some public funds. But determining, how that happens, there hasn't really been an in-depth study on the area to see what really could happen and how much it would cost. So the proposed typical is a 4-lane divided. So what this means is if any projects come in, we will be looking to try to secure that 110-foot right-of-way as those project comes in, so that the road can be built at some point, and then if it shifts, but as projects come in, we would get the right of way so that the larger road could be put in at some point. And this is an example of how 49 potentially could be greened up or improved. And again, so another example about what 49 could look like. Right now all you have is pavement to pavement. As far as utilities, there is that it can be served, but again, it's going to have to be that public-private partnership more than likely. Looking at phases, there were some phases that seemed to make sense. In phase 1, do some initial upgrades, serve some properties to the south side. Phase 2, there are some pump stations that could come offline. And then phase 3 would be a parallel line to improve capacity near Moorhead. But again, this study looks 20 years out, and you would really have to have the private investment to make everything happen, just because of the topography and how much it would cost. So the recommendations out of it are to coordinate with Concord, so to make connections, increase capacity with pressure issues. Also to coordinate with Mecklenburg County on serving the north and southwest area, so Harrisburg already has some agreements in place. And again, to look at potential funding strategies. So out of this, the recommendations, we talked about the PUD. So one of the recommendations is for that property to be rezoned, whether some of it goes into the PID district. That would be a new district that Harrisburg would have to create in their zoning ordinance. To take that out of there so that again, the property isn't tied up. To conduct a feasibility study for the Caldwell Road extension. Again, we've talked about it for years, but nobody really has any numbers. Does it shift to the right? Does it go to the left? And to take a look at a corridor plan for 49 to see 49 was downgraded from a freeway to a highway. So now that opens up some of the access restrictions and also the potential for some streetscape improvements because you couldn't do that with the previous classification. So this would be a complete street design, which would include bike lanes and sidewalks. Harrisburg, we just went through the CTP index update, and Harrisburg is proposing on any of their major thoroughfares to put in bike lanes. This is an example of that, creating that better entranceway, so coming in on 49, what it could look like. And then also taking the opportunity to provide the greenway connections. The county did adopt the Carolina Thread Trail Plan. Harrisburg and the county worked very closely together on their parks and recreation, so there are some opportunities here for partnerships. And then the bottom one would be the Back Creek Greenway. So Mallard Creek is a primary, and then Back Creek is a secondary. To look at opportunities for trail and transit and rail connections. There's been some talk, Harrisburg would love to have a rail station over near the town center or near the town park. So again, to look at those opportunities and how can they make those connections. And that has been some other discussion. There has been some other discussion. There's a regional plan that is probably going to happen with the COG, and they are also taking a look at this. Assist with orientation for better circulation, so help to get people around town. You all have already seen, I think, the CVB's wayfinding signage, so this would be the town's part of that. And then again, the county is putting up some signs as well as strategic locations, so just to help people get around a little bit easier. And then to preserve key areas and features. So when you look at this map, those red areas give you an idea of the slope on this property. The slope there is anywhere from 21 to 74%. So you can see between that and the orange why this property really hasn't developed. Between that and the floodplain and all the permitting you would have to do, it really does seem that it would be more logical for it to kind of develop as a north and then as a south without necessarily having to make those connections. So where are we at? The Harrisburg Planning and Zoning Commission approved the plan on March 21st and recommended it go to Town Council. Town Council approved it on April 10th. Our Cabarrus County Planning and Zoning Commission approved it April 11th and decided to send it to you all for final consideration. So the next step would be for you all to consider holding a public hearing and then for us to co-adopt the document. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Is there a map on there somewhere with the city limits? Or is everything in the city limits?
Most of it's in the city limits, or that Harrisburg actually has some extraterritorial jurisdiction, quite a bit left. But we do have some zoning, particularly as you get up around Hudspeth Road and 29. There's some areas that are in.
But just those few
unincorporated,
parcels
yeah.
that were at the beginning of the presentation.
And we would not be recommending any rezonings to go with this. Actually, the zoning under county is proper for that.
And this is a very small piece of the Harrisburg land use plan, so the next step for us overall is that we will take this information and roll it into the Harrisburg. We're going to be updating the Harrisburg area plan this next coming year.
And with that particular plan, there is a lot more of that jurisdiction that's unincorporated and falls under the county's zoning jurisdiction. So we're working, as Susie said, we're working in correspondence with the town to co-adopt a plan for all that area, both in the town and outside. And this has been, there is a lot of detail for what is not a huge area, but it's very challenging, as she identified. It also has its strengths. Over 50% of this property, the vacant property here, is owned by one entity. You know that entity well, the Speedway, in some form or fashion. So there were direct meetings with representatives from the Speedway, and they have a planning and zoning representative, Walter Field, who works with them. We were able to meet with Walter and discuss a lot of these recommendations, because the trickiest thing is going to be to eventually someday figure out how to do that Caldwell Road extension and what its path is. And I don't think even they know. We'll have to go in, they'll want to go in and price it out, because it's going to be privately built in many segments for that to happen. And they're going to want to look at what's the best way to build that. And then there's the other artificial line, to the county manager's point, is that the county line runs through there. So some of the development that's occurring that's affected by this and will be affected by the road network is in Mecklenburg County. So there's also been work with Mecklenburg and Charlotte on this to see how that road network connects, because a portion of what will be the Caldwell Road extension, it will probably the northern segment of it going up to 29 will actually connect in Mecklenburg County rather than in Cabarrus, to give you enough distance away from the Moorhead Road, the current Moorhead Road 29 intersection. So again, a lot of challenges here, but a lot of potential, because the location is what really drives this, is 485 right there and the Speedway 29 and 49. There's already a lot of good transportation infrastructure, but you have this piece in between. And Harrisburg's been looking for a long time at a way to connect 29 and 49 that is not Moorhead Road. And this offers them that potential.
Okay, questions, commissioners? That's a lot of information.
Yeah, so the request is public hearing.
That's correct. The request is to hold a public hearing and to consider co-adopting this plan with the town of Harrisburg. They've already adopted it. And again, our Planning and Zoning Commission recommended unanimously that you all consider it for adoption. And they have been very involved in the process. We've been providing them with updates along the way, and they've been providing feedback as well.
Okay, any other questions? All right, move on to the next item, proposed text amendments.
So what you have in front of you are 4 different text amendments. The first proposed amendments are to Chapter 6, and these amendments are really almost typos, if you want to call them that. So the first one would be to add the site triangle to Chapter 6. It somehow was deleted as we moved along in the process. The second one, can you scroll to the ordinance, please? There. No, that's 4. Number 1, right there. Thank you. So to add the site triangle diagram back into the ordinance, and then also to revise Section 6-12. We currently don't have language that addresses standalone mounted solar panels, and we treat those like we do accessory buildings, so this is just to codify that. And then also to change a reference that the accessory building in swimming pools is no longer in Chapter 5, that it's in Chapter 7. So just some minor amendments to this chapter, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So on the standalone solar panels, that just means you have to follow setback requirements?
That's correct.
And that's all it says? Right.
That's correct. We have some folks out in the county who have actual solar panels like you would see along the roadside
Mhm.
at their homes. And it's just to say, if you're going to do that, you need to meet the setbacks for an accessory structure.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions about that one? Okay.
Okay, the second text amendment is, if you all remember, back in the fall, we looked at the bed and breakfast requirements, and you all recommended that we go back to the text amendment committee and take a look at it some more. So what we have, number 2. So what you have in front of you is some proposed text. One of the items was that it had a 5 acre, we were proposing the 5 acre minimum. So now, the board, the text amendment committee and the board took a look at it, and so what we are proposing now is that in the AOCR or LDR zoning districts, that the lot size has to meet or exceed the conventional subdivision standards. So what that means is that lot would either be a 2 acre lot or a 3 acre lot. So compatible with neighboring lots or larger. And then for MDR and LDR and HDR, these lots can go down to, 20,000 square feet. So for those zoning districts, it's proposed to be at least 1 acre, so that if there is activity on that site, it's not right next to the neighbor. Some minor changes to clarify that gardens, patios, and outdoor reception areas should be located at least 100 feet from the property line. And then the board also wanted to clarify that as far as parking spaces, that you would have spaces for employees, but then also the owners, so that they were included in that. Rules of construction and definitions would also be amended to address the concern that the Board of Commissioners had at the last meeting, which was that the bed and breakfast not operate, since it is on a smaller parcel, that it not operate as a reception facility. So we looked at the definitions in the statutes, and based on the definition from the state, which is the definition that you have in front of you, a bed and breakfast has to be occupied and be the permanent residence of the owner, and we currently do not allow reception facilities to be a home occupation, so it does make them mutually exclusive. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I had a quick one on that one. I mean, I know the one for parking, it makes perfect sense of what you're trying to do, and 1 per guest bedroom and 1 per employee, but then the addition of "and the owner," I mean, most likely assuming that there's a couple that owns it, 1 person, whatever. What if it's some other entity that, is an LLC and has 17 owners? Is there a way to?
Well, that's where, based on the definition, it has to be owner occupied, based on the state definition. Could you scroll down a little bit, please?
Okay, maybe I'm.
Yeah. So based on that definition, you have to live there. So it would be for the person that owns it or the manager. So if it was an LLC, it would be the manager's parking space.
So it doesn't have to be owned.
So it doesn't have to be necessarily
They
the
can
owner.
hire a manager to live there.
Right, but it has to be the permanent residence of that owner or that manager. So it was intended to have the parking space to account for the owners or.
Yeah,
we
no,
could-
that part
yeah.
I get. I'm just, it just seems like there may be situations where, and maybe I'm not following your explanation on the definition, but it just seems like there may be some other structures that there would be more than just a couple people that would own the house, or more than just a married couple that own the house. And I guess that's what, I don't know if you need language that says something about that, or maybe that's making it more confusing, but
Yeah, I think we
anyway,
can,
that's
I
just
think,
a
I think we
question.
can handle it with the language that's there, because in most cases, it is actually going to be, the person that lives there. Or if, if you're, like you're saying, if it was an entity that had it, they would have a manager on site. So, I mean, we can clarify, and the owners or manager. I mean, we can just make that clarification.
The owner doesn't live there. It says they have to live there.
That's the state's definition. That
It's in
is.
our ordinance, though.
That is the legislature. That's the definition that the state puts out, and that is the definition by the state of a bed and breakfast. That's why our language directly mimics what's in the statutes.
And I think the question for me would be the parking space one where that doesn't, it should say the same thing that the state definition says.
And we can change that.
Rather than saying the owner, say the owner or the manager of the business. That would seem to me.
Okay.
Because if I had 10 friends and we went together and bought this 10,000 square foot house and said we were going to have a bed and breakfast, and we hired someone to manage it, that would be permissible, right?
As long as they can get permitted through the state.
Yeah. And so no one of those owners would be parking there. It would only be the manager that we hired. Is that what you're asking, Blake? Is that?
Yes, and so
Is
the
that-
provision should be that instead of the parking being for the owner, it would be for the manager. Because that's what you're really trying to accomplish. You're trying to take care of a space for any employee.
The manager-
Per guest room, and then you know there's somebody else that's living there or
Right.
managing the property, whatever.
And the owner could be the manager or not.
It may not.
Yeah.
It could be somebody that you hired to live there. So,
And I can fix that and get it back to the clerk before the meeting.
Okay, so that, everybody,
You're only asking about the parking space. You're not asking if I wanted to go out and buy a big house out in the country, and I want to develop it as a bed and breakfast, and I hire a manager, and part of their manager is free rent to live there and operate it. Is that permissible?
Again, they would have to get permitted through the state based on the definition and how the state regulates them.
But it is under D,
Yeah.
is the permanent residence of the owner or the manager of the business. So yes.
Okay.
So we would just then, Susie said you'd make the change to match the parking space to that definition in D.
Susie, I have a question about B there at the top. You moved it, any area to be used for parking or other guest amenity areas such as gardens, patios, or outdoor guest reception areas shall be located a minimum of 100 feet from the property line of any residentially zoned or used property. That's pretty vague. You know, when you say gardens, what kind of garden are we talking about? And we're talking about used or being, you know, the type property that's being used or, what was it there? Residentially zoned or used. What's it being used for?
So.
Is it woods? Is it?
Right, so when we look at uses that are adjacent to properties, we look at whether it is zoned residential, so a residential district, or we look if it is used residentially, because we may have, you know, property that could be zoned industrial, but it actually has a house on it that's occupied and being used as a residence. So use takes precedence over zoning, so it would be either or. And that is standard language in our ordinance that we administer on a daily basis.
The question is, how would you define gardens?
I mean, as far as gardens or patios, it would just be the outdoor areas that they would show us on a site plan that would be used by the people who live there.
Well, let's take an example. Let's come to, Steve, your place. I think you told me you got 2 acres up there, biggest lot in the city, I believe you said. But anyway, in that example that you were talking about, what if you and some other investors decided to turn Steve's place into a bed and breakfast, which, you know, a lot of towns, small quaint towns, are having bed and breakfasts, and for whatever reason, you know, as a generator for income or whatever the reason might be. I can see where that would cause in this particular case, if Steve was to try to do that, that would cause him big problems, big issues. And then on the other hand, you take someone like what Mike had mentioned, someone that wants to do a bread and breakfast out in the county, he's got 100 acres there, and I can see where staying 100 feet from the line would be fine there because you got plenty of land. But in the case of Steve, it would really put some severe restrictions on him.
Well, and again, the properties that we're dealing with are unincorporated county, so this would be larger lot type properties, not really a municipal limits where you're gonna have
Okay.
smaller lots like you would in Concord or Kannapolis.
Yeah, well, I still think that the gardens needs to be defined as to what a garden is. A lot of people have plant gardens and flower gardens and vegetable gardens and all kind of gardens, and so that's a vague word.
Well, and again, the intent is if they showed it on the site plan, anywhere where those patrons would be, that would be accessible for them, where they might be able to have, a little reception, or they're having a tea, or whatever they're having, that all of that active area is 100 feet from the property line.
Well, I guess I'm just too old-fashioned because I don't really go along with that. I don't personally, for the simple reason that I think that, we're taking more and more control of a person's property that they own. They're paying taxes on it, and we're telling them basically what they can and what they can't do. And something like that in an area that you described, out in the areas that we are in the county control, if he's got acres and acres of land, his neighbors has got acres and acres of land, and it's zoned residential, and or used for whatever reason, he could have a garden there, a corn garden, or it could be trees. It's being used, and I think we're taking away from people and making more tighter restrictions for people, more hoops to jump through to do what they want to on their own land. And that's just my 2 cents worth. I don't know how the rest of the people feel about it, but that's just my 2 cents. And I'm for one to have less government control and less restrictions on people's property. Now, don't get me wrong, zoning is a good thing. It's a very good thing, because I can't imagine what it would look like without zoning, without restrictions and all that, because it would look like some cities that we've all been through that didn't have anything, and that's why they're that way. And I understand it, but I really don't understand this, though. On that particular part, I don't. But that doesn't mean it won't pass or whatever, but I personally am not in favor of that. And how to rectify it, I don't know.
So if the items that are added in red on that B, does that actually add any additional restrictions, or does it just clarify what you're talking about as far as guest amenity areas?
The intent was for it to clarify.
Yeah.
What was the original language that was there? Because I was thinking that there was the changes for the text.
The original text is what was in black. It said any area to be used as a party, reception, or garden, parking, or other guest amenity area shall be located a minimum of 100 feet. And we were just trying to clarify that if it's that active space, that it needs to be 100 feet away from the property line.
So that's been in the ordinance
Correct.
all along for.
Correct. It's really just moving that part of the sentence down to the
Yeah,
next.
so how long has it been in the ordinance?
Years.
10 years, 15 years?
This ordinance dates to 1993, so I don't know. I'm thinking probably been in there since.
So I'm just
93.
curious how many, if you can think of situations where this affected a property owner
We haven't had any requests for a bed and breakfast.
So right now, we haven't had a single bed and breakfast in the unincorporated area of the county.
No, sir, because mostly they want to be located in towns where people can walk.
Right.
Unless it's, geared towards probably spending a weekend on a farm or something like that.
Right.
Well, that restriction right there would sort of discourage anybody from wanting to do it anyway, In my opinion, it would discourage you because you'd have to go through so much. It's just like some of the other folks that we know here in the county that we're dealing with another issue where one has to do something and another one, and these people are, squawking about it. And then you got the other one that just don't squawk, they just go on and do it.
Right.
And, and it puts us in the middle of it. But, like I said, I don't want to be redundant, but I just believe in less restrictions. Less restrictions. And if it's already been in there and you hadn't had no complaints, I don't know why we're fixing it.
Again, when we brought this to the board to change the lot size, this language was there. When we took it back to the text amendment committee, they decided that there were some other clarifications needed just so that folks would understand what they needed to do.
I'm just looking at B. If I have a square acre, what's that, 208, 208, something like that? So where can I put, if I have a square acre, where can I put a patio or reception area? That's more than 100 feet away from the property line. Can't, right?
Yeah, you would need a larger parcel, yeah.
I know we talked about, and I'm trying to remember when we talked about it before, there was a minimum lot size of
5 acres that was
5
proposed.
acres. And that's really what brought up the discussion. And so now we have we completely eliminated that minimums?
Yes, it would be the lot size for the district, which would be either the 2 or 3 acre lot. and
Depending
then-
on the zoning.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
In the smaller, the MDR, LDR, it's an acre.
right.
Because that's our higher density districts.
So if you,
Like having the clarification of the patio and the guest reception area. And interestingly enough, garden has been there, however, it's in black, so that word's been in there. I kind of agree with Lynn, too, that word's a little ambiguous. Where I grew up, there's pavers and palm trees in between brick buildings, and they call that a garden, and then, like Lynn mentioned, a corn garden. Well, it's the same word, and it's two vastly different things. So, if you strike the word garden and just put patios and outdoor guest reception area, to me, I think you've kind of at least clarified what you're doing. Again, though, I don't know if we're a solution in search of a problem, if you've not really had one before. So, but clearly the intent of not having a reception on top of somebody, on your neighbor, you got to have that. And I like the fact that we're clarifying that. So where we go from here is, Mr. Chairman, I don't know, but the word garden is a little bit ambiguous.
yeah, well, and what now is troubling me is the fact that if you're in the MDR, LDR, or HDR districts, you can't have anything. If you have a 1 acre lot, there is nowhere on your property that would meet the 100-foot restriction to even put down pavers, a palm tree, and a lawn chair, right?
Well, and again, with the LDR, MDR, and HDR, those are going to be actual subdivisions because that's our open space option subdivision design. So they would be located in a subdivision next to, other properties in a suburban type subdivision, not a
Right.
downtown type subdivision. So that's where, the 1 acre would come into play, just so they weren't right on top of the person next to them. Because
Right.
that's not the expectation when you move into a suburban, rural type subdivision.
Well, yeah, I mean, looking at it from the other point of view, I wouldn't be wild about it if there were different guests in and out every night, sitting out adjacent to the property line, infringing on the privacy of the neighbor. I don't know, but that's kind of one of the things that happens, but I would be inclined to go with the recommendation from the folks that have studied it. Since we haven't had any incidents to use it, but that's just my opinion. And perhaps if there are people that are concerned about it, they will come to the public hearing and express those concerns. I see heads nodding. Do we have consensus? Okay.
And it could also, I guess, be looked at, Susie, as a case by case. I mean, if that's cut in stone and that's just the way it has to be, then, you know, and I guess like the chairman said, you would just do the public hearing, see what kind of response we get, and hadn't had any complaints for 25 years. Maybe it'll stay that way. But for the one person that does want to do this, and he can't do it because of this restriction, I probably won't be here by then. None of us probably will be here by that time, but we'll be the ones, they'll say, who done this? You know.
Well, and again, one of the limiting factors when you're talking about uses in our ordinance is that, you know, these uses have to occur using well and septic. So general rule of thumb in Cabarrus County is to get well and septic on a lot, you need at least a minimum of 1 acre. So a lot of these uses are precluded by that because they just can't get the type of system that they need to have these commercial businesses in residential areas. It's there, but whether or not you can, you know, get everything you need together to make it happen from a utility standpoint, or, you know, so it does somewhat limit, not because of the ordinance, just because of soil types and property.
Okay, any additional discussion on that one? We will call for the public hearing and go from there, and we thank you. Does that complete your?
Oh, no.
No. Oh, on this, yes, we're still on this same topic. Continue.
On that particular one, yes, we're done, sir.
Well, we got mixed up on our order the way it is with us, so I think that's what threw me off.
So the text amendment number 3 that we are proposing is for reception facilities. So again, the board kind of directed us to go back and take a look at, you know, what standards we had, what's out there, and, you know, do we need to look at it? Do we need to change it? So the text amendment committee has probably looked at this particular language 3 or 4 different times, and the Planning and Zoning Commission has actually looked at it in meetings, I think at least on 3 different occasions. So the proposed changes would be in number 4, instead of total number of seats, that would be based on capacity for the venue. We have seen anywhere from 100 to, I think, 450 as numbers that have been submitted for the different ones that have already been approved in one form or another. With building elevations, that would be clarified that the building elevations are for all permanent structures to be used to accommodate receptions and or events on the site. When this language was originally proposed to be placed into the ordinance, it was based on having a historic structure on the property. That language did not make it through P&Z and the Board of Commissioners. So this is trying to get back to the original intent where it would be a permanent structure, a real business, not just places where people were potentially going out and putting up a tent and putting up temporary bathrooms and then, you know, bringing 300 people to that piece of property next to residential properties. Based on what the board has seen and has considered between variances and capacity, We took a look at the 5-acre minimum and also took into consideration comments that we've heard at the public hearings, at the zoning meetings. So instead of the minimum being a 5-acre tract, it would now be based on the capacity. So if you were only having up to 100 guests, you could have the 5-acre tract. 101 to 200 would be 7.5 acres, and then 201 to 300 or more, you would have to have at least 10 acres to support that type of a use. In D, again, it's to clarify that the parking areas need to be at least 200 feet away from a street or a property line. But then when the text amendment committee looked at this, there were some sites that came in, and because the sites were very large, they had some alternate ways to meet the landscape, which still made sense, but it wasn't at the property line. So the intent for this section A and B is to allow folks who have sites that they want to use that are more interior to the site to reduce that 200-foot setback to 100 feet. They would not have to ask for a variance. The board would make that decision as Planning and Zoning Commission to be able to reduce it as long as they could show that they could meet those buffers on the property, but that they did not have to be at the exterior property line. So it's to allow some flexibility for properties that, they may have tree lines closer to the buildings, or they may zigzag, or if it's a farm that comes in and they don't want to put in the landscape in one particular area, but towards the exterior they have it. So again, to allow for some flexibility. The next change that is proposed is in L. So to remove some of the uses that were listed and to clarify that temporary tents will only be allowed for no more than 180 days in a calendar year. That is actually a fire marshal's office restriction. So they can put it up for 3 days and take it back down, or they can leave it up for the 180 days, but they can only have it for 180 days. And to, again, to kind of get it back in line with the original intent, which would be that the tents would not exceed the square footage of the largest primary structure and have to be shown on the site plan. So a tent would now become a true accessory use to the facility, not a primary use. The next section, 8-3, we had a typo there. So the proposed language is to clarify that a simple majority vote by the commission is needed now and not an 80% vote. And then with the wireless telecommunication services, that language is proposed to allow the company that actually constructs the tower to bond out the tower at capacity at 1.25 of whatever that cost is, so that we are only dealing with the people who construct, build, and rent the towers. And then when they come in to do a co-location, the person who's co-locating on that facility would no longer be required to provide a bond, because it would be handled at the outset by the company that is building the tower and then renting out the tower space. So that would be an SBA Communications or a Crown and Castle, not a Verizon or a T-Mobile giving us those bonds.
So do you know how many reception centers there are in the county? I mean, you probably do. You've had to go through it with them probably, but I mean, are we talking 5 more? I'm just asking that because my next question would be, what are the acreage range of those? And do they fit within these requirements, or if these requirements come up and they're doing something different, are they going to be affected by this, or how's that going to work?
And one of the reasons that the acreage came up is we had somebody that applied for a variance that was they were at about, I think, 4.6 acres, but it was a small number of people that they would accommodate. And the board actually granted that variance. So we have one that is a little less than 5 acres. And then we have up to, I think it was 50-some acres that, and these are the ones that have come in through the conditional use permitting process.
Of any that are in business now, will this put guidelines on them that they aren't already operating under, I guess is what I'm trying to ask, or do you have any idea?
The ones that are approved now are approved under what they got approved under.
So like
This would be for
grandfathered, so
anybody
this is
new
going
coming
forward.
in,
Okay.
or, if they wanted to expand, it would apply to new property that was being added, but it would not be anything that would apply to them unless they were coming back to us for a permit for some reason.
So why in L, what was the rationale behind marking out the things that were there, playground, bathroom facilities, that?
We haven't had anybody that has, those were just things that kind of landed there when the original language was put into the ordinance. So the amenity areas, the gardens, the gazebos, we have had some that have proposed those as accessory uses, which is an appropriate accessory use. But mainly it's been the tents. And so we wanted to, let somebody know up front that if you are proposing to use a tent, that it's the 180 days.
Right.
Because some people think they can keep a tent up for, 9 months out of the year, and that's not the way that the fire code works.
Mm-hmm.
And the bathroom facilities, again, as an accessory use, it's not really going to be an accessory because you need to have the bathrooms.
Right. So I guess I probably don't really understand the definition of accessory use. What would that be? What would
So-
that definition be?
You mean in relation to this or just in general?
In general, or
So
both?
in general, if you have a shed outside behind your house, that's an accessory use.
Okay.
And it has its own separate set of standards that come along with it. So these things would be considered incidental, to that. So at a reception facility, you may have a tent, or you may have the gazebo, which is not the primary structure.
Right.
It's accessory to that primary use.
Okay. And in the past, now we're allowing temporary tents for the maximum amount that the fire marshal will allow.
Yes, so people have had to ask for variances to use the tents
In the past.
because the tents don't meet the commercial design standards that you're supposed to meet for these sites. Because
Right.
it is a commercial use in a potentially residential district.
So we're actually loosening
Yes.
that up quite a bit and allow where now they can do it automatically without having to come in and ask for a variance and all that.
Correct, as long as,
Right.
it's below that threshold. So
Right.
they have the primary structures that are real structures, and then the tent is accessory to those primary structures.
Right, and that fire marshal restriction, that's a state law, or is that a?
Correct,
Yeah,
correct.
so we're giving them the maximum flexibility
Correct.
that we're allowed by law to give.
Correct, and that's where, with the fire marshal's office, if they wanted to have it up for 30 days and take it down or put it up one time, because each time they take it up and put it down, it does have to be inspected. So how that 180 days works out during that calendar year
Right.
is completely up to the applicant, and they work with the fire marshal's office on that.
Okay.
So the type of tents that we're seeing are the type of tents that you would see at the Speedway for hospitality tents, the big tents, with the windows on the side. Those are the type of tents that we're seeing with the steel frames.
Okay, other questions? Okay. Does that cover it all?
We have one more.
One more, okay.
So the last proposed amendment is to add an additional use to our ordinance. This use will be called a permanent temporary event facility, and the intent of this type of use is to allow the development of sites where they would hold what would typically be considered temporary events. So an RV show, a fair, a craft fair, a circus. So there are some additional standards that are proposed for it. So the site would need to be a minimum of 10 acres. It would need to be located off and have direct access to a major or minor thoroughfare. So if those of you that are familiar with the Speedway and the property across from the Speedway, the type of events that they have there are the type of events that we're talking about. So it's, events that happen at the Speedway or events that happen separately. They would have to follow ADA parking, and then also have that, the site would need to be accessible. They would be allowed to use turf parking, which is something that we allowed for the reception facilities and then also for the bed and breakfast. So similar to that, they wouldn't have to go out there and do a bunch of paving. Trash facilities and dumpsters would have to be located 100 feet from any property line. Signage, the typical in the commercial district where this is proposed, you can have a 10,000 square foot lot. So we are doing a trade-off, and they would be allowed some additional signage because of the additional lot size. So they would get roughly, I think it's 64 square feet of signage, so that they have some visibility from the street. Again, we would allow temporary tents or stages as long as they have the right type of permits and they get the right inspections. You'll see that number 9 does talk about alcohol sales, because alcohol sales is prohibited in the county. There are some loopholes, though, as far as statutes for some properties in Cabarrus County where they are allowed to have sales. So if this particular property was one of those properties and it was allowed, then that would trump the county's rule. And then number 10 is just that on-site emergency personnel may be required. So, for example, if somebody had a property and they wanted to have one of the foot races or the challenge races that comes around, we work very closely with the fire marshal's office and with EMS to have the right kind of staffing on site. So even though this would be a permanent type facility, there may still be some outside requirements as far as personnel and what would be required, because you're having that public assembly component on the site. So this would be a new use, and it is proposed for the general commercial zoning district.
Okay, God bless you guys, because this gives me a headache beyond belief. So thank you for what you guys do. But explain to me, so a permanent temporary event facility, so that's an event facility that might bring in different type events, which is why it's called a permanent temporary, correct?
Yeah, so if you think Cabarrus Arena,
Right.
but much smaller scale.
Right. So like those, was it the mud runs or whatever? Is it something like
Yes.
that, in which would be it's something like this we're talking about, or what?
They could have those type of events, but this is more for, places to host events that would be more kind of in and out, not just once a year.
And have we had demand for this, and this is why this has come up, or we're just getting ahead of the game, or where did this come from?
We have been working with some sites for probably the last 3 years, where the way that our temporary use ordinance is set up, there is a 30-day waiting period in between when you can have a permit and when you can get the next permit. Some people are seeing success with these type of uses, and so they would like to not be subject to some of those temporary use restrictions. Because, once you get to a certain point, you're no longer a temporary use, you're really running a business. depending on how many times you need it. So this would allow that more permanent business type site where then they could kind of roll those events in and out and wouldn't have to get the temporary permits from zoning, but they still have to get building and fire marshal permits like they need to.
And of these people that you're talking about, these guidelines seem reasonable to them? They've had no objections, or they've got heartburn over any, or do they even know about them, or?
We have worked with them as well as their legal counsel to try to come up
Okay.
with
Something that's
something that
workable
makes
for
sense, as well as the text amendment committee. And this seems to make sense to them. And as far as I know, they're agreeable to it. I would fully expect that they would probably have a representative here at the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, and I apologize for continuing to ask you if you're finished, but the order that these are in our agenda are not the order that they've been presented, so I'll ask one more time. Is that, get it?
We're good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up, we have from Tax Administration, a collection agreement with the City of Concord. And Janice Morrison is with us tonight to talk about that.
Good evening. Tax Administration staff has been working with the City of Concord, Finance Department, attorneys, and collection staff to explore the consolidation of tax collections. The county currently collects all jurisdictions with the exception of Concord. Bringing Concord's tax collection under the county, the citizens will receive one bill, one-stop shopping, and be able to pay their taxes with one payment. This would simplify delinquent tax collections and avoid a duplication of efforts, as the county and the city currently collect all outstanding taxes for the same citizens. The county attorney is working with the Concord to draft an agreement. The city council is slated to consider this proposal at their June meeting. We're requesting a motion to approve the collection of City of Concord taxes and authorize the county manager and county attorney to execute that interlocal agreement, subject to approval by the City of Concord and subject to review or revision by the county attorney. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to help you at this time.
Okay, questions? Sounds like
I
a
feel like
smart
somebody
thing
should
to do.
ask her a question.
Yeah.
She's been sitting over there since 4 o'clock this afternoon. Is there anything you want to talk about? I'm kidding. No, I don't have any questions. That sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah, I think it will add a lot of convenience to the taxpayers. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one more item, 4.14 from Human Resources. Lundy will talk with us about it.
Good evening, one more time. This one should be very brief, I hope. The county offers our employees a deferred compensation plan in addition to our 401K and our HSA, which is another type of compensation vehicle. We have been under the administration of that plan for nationwide for a number of years, and we have looked to other options. Prudential is the vendor that we utilize for our 401K, and that also ties to the North Carolina retirement system. We would like to move to them as our vendor of choice starting 7/1/17. The reason for that primarily is to simplify things for our retirees. We've recently had some examples of folks trying to look at their portfolio of assets, and it's a little bit confusing when it's under different vendors. Allowing folks to utilize Prudential for 457 would allow them to look at one website and see all of those investment options together. It also would minimize the forms and the options they have to fill out when they seek retirement. So we, at this point, would plan to keep the nationwide option for those who choose that plan. We've talked with the representatives, and we've agreed that we can peacefully coexist with two plans. But again, to simplify things for employees coming in, we feel like a number of our employees have requested Prudential over the years, and we have not been able to offer that. So what we have been asked to provide is a board resolution that we're presenting to you for signature, and we are working with the county attorney for a contract with Prudential that, again, would start effective 7/1 for our new hires and existing employees who would prefer to move to that plan.
This is a total voluntary plan. It says all contributions directly from it's an optional plan.
Correct. Any questions or concerns with that? Is there anything else I need to request formally for the agenda?
Okay, so is that already included on our regular meeting agenda? Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next item is approval of the regular meeting agenda. And I think item G7, there was a request to move that to the June meeting. That was the co-sponsorship agreement. And then, if I count correctly, we have 6 public hearing requests also. Does anyone see other changes that need to be made to the agenda? If not, I would entertain a motion that we approve the regular meeting agenda with the one change of moving G7 to June, and also approve the setting of the 6 public hearings. Okay, we have a motion. Do I hear a second? Okay, any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. And at this time, I would entertain a motion to go into closed session per North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3, 4, and 5 to discuss pending litigation, economic development, and acquisition of real estate. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. We are now in closed session. Thank you.